Hello, hello, hello. Uh, it's Saturday night. Therefore, it's time for Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze. I want to thank everyone who joined us last week. We had a real good show last week, real good discussion. I want to thank everyone who was here last week. I want to thank everyone who's going to be here this week, all the participants in the chat. You guys who don't come up on the channel, that's fine, but keep the comments rolling in the chat. That expands and fleshes out the conversations a bit more. I appreciate all of you. You know the deal. Before we start the show officially, I'd like to come on here and let you guys know what we have in store for you guys tonight. Let me make sure I'm being heard. Okay, yes. I'm being heard out there, so I don't need any ones tonight, but thank you. Jamelia is here saying good night. Good night to you. Um, Glad that you came through. Um, Anyone who wants to join the panel tonight can click the link that's pinned to the top of the chat. And you too can add your voice to these conversations that we have on a weekly basis. Remember to tell your people that we have Shoot the Breeze every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 p.m. Come one, come all, you know. Tonight we're going to be discussing the effects of Nigeria as a Berlinist state. We're going to be talking about the genetic parameters of the black world. We're going to be talking about black identity or African identity, the most updated position on our geo-cultural identity, uh, as discussed by Obadele Kambon. Um, we're going to try to answer the question: why does a particular black woman, or black women in general, maybe question mark, question mark, question mark, think that quote unquote good dudes need to accept their bad decisions? And lastly, time permitting, we're going to discuss is black marriage our issue in America? And if so, how can we fix it? So all of those topics are on the slate tonight. Like I said, if you want to join the panel tonight, click the link pinned to the top of the chat. Hopefully everything is good. Let me just make sure everything is going to be good with that. So click the link at the top of the chat, and you too can join the discussion. In the meantime, I'm going to start the show officially, and on the other side, I'll drop Shoot the Breeze topic number one, as well as introduce any and all panelists that's joining me tonight. So you guys do stay tuned.
Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African nationalist and Garveyite network committed to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
To me, it don't matter. I think people are so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did. They lemmings. So to me, it don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedral Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was gonna do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They're a slave master, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you praying to, you know.
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Africans generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
All right. So as it stands, I don't have any panelists with me yet, but that's not going to stop the show. Actually, shout out to Kofi, who's out there in the chat. You guys make sure tune in to Kofi. To Kofi, I have to update that intro to include your show now too. I've been meaning to do that for a little while. I'm kind of behind, so I'll be doing that soon. All right. But make sure you guys check out Kofi. Kofi had a very interesting two-parter episode these last 2 weeks that you guys should go to his channel and check out. Anthony McPhail was a part of that broadcast as well. He's saying peace to everyone out there as well. So make sure you guys tune into Kofi as well as all the other shows mentioned in that spot. Kofi says he still loves the intro. Trigger Happy, this topic was up for last week, but we didn't get to it. This was going to be topic number 5 last week. So this topic kind of deals. Well, we'll get into it in a second. In the meantime, let me introduce my first panelist tonight, Buana. Buana, how are you this week?
I'm good, Kuku. How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. Thanks for coming through as always.
Good. Just let me just say shout out to Kofi. They did do an excellent episode the other day. In terms of critiquing a lot of the information that we probably thought to be true, but it's not necessarily true. I love the fact that how the brothers are doing a review and questioning some of the things that we believe to be true, and trying to critique it. I would like for them, if I was to make a suggestion, to do something on Van Sertima, since there is a big question up in the air as to whether he is a pseudo person or if he is actually a legitimate scholar. I would like to hear that conversation. But thank you, Koku, for allowing me to come on tonight, brother.
Yeah, no problem, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I saw Buan in the chat as well during the 2 episodes. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they will tackle that you brought up just now. So we'll see. Kofi said he'll be joining soon, so that's great. Anthony says the intro is great. All right, appreciate that, all of you. You know what? Without further ado, though, it's just me and Buan for now, but that's all right. Let's deal with Shoot the Breeze topic number 1. Shoot the Breeze topic number 1 says the effects of Nigeria as a Berlinist state. How accurate is this analysis, and does this explain why Nigerians have certain characteristics? This comes with a link that's going to take us to Twitter. Let me make sure I get it set up properly. Yeah. So here we are. This takes us to this tweet by Dami Adenugu. It says, the perfect analysis of Nigeria as a society. Do you disagree with him? This is not a thread. I'll read some of the comments after, but we'll watch it. This is a pretty short video. I might play it twice. We'll watch it and then we'll critique.
You see the classism in Nigeria, yeah? Just too crazy. I saw this tweet, right, and it summed up perfectly everything I saw in Nigeria during my time there. And it's not exclusive to one thing. Like, you can literally see it between friends, families. Here, your status isn't just about what you have. It's literally about how you show it as well. I mean, just look at this ape. The way I've seen people talk to their drivers, their helpers, it's crazy. Like, these people are humans too. And it has to be said, man, a lot of well-off people there are just not nice. Like, it's just too clear. But you see, the thing is, yeah, it's like the system forces you to pick a side. Be the big man or get taken for granted. And let me tell you, I learned this the hard way on my trip to Nigeria. We had a driver. This guy was nice, very polite, solid guy, or so I thought. But he was new. So one day we asked him to wait for us after he dropped us at an event. Just wait. Tell me why my man decided to drive from the island to mainland to go and drop something off. So the car breaks down now, yeah? Called him to ask him where he was, and do you know what I heard? This guy was abusing me on the phone to the mechanic, calling me a fool and telling him I'm disturbing him. Not even sure he knew the phone was on or that I understood Yoruba, but that was all I needed. And that's the thing, I feel like you can't win here. If you're nice, they'll show you shaggy. If you're firm, they'll say you're mean. The system forces you to put on the front, to be harder, to be colder, to be tougher, just to avoid getting walked over. And you find that people come back home and start doing the same. And why not? Because it's what they see. And now it's created a system where everyone seems to be in survival mode all the time. Then you have both the top and the bottom ready to exploit each other. More often than not, the top win. And it's led to a culture where people just don't trust kindness anymore. To me, it doesn't have to be this way, but like, it's gonna take a long time to change. Like, respect shouldn't be about fear or money. It's about seeing people for who they are, not what they have. I don't know, that's what I just noticed when I was there. If you got different opinions, let me know. If you agree, let me know as well. One thing is clear though, it's clearly a problem and it needs to be sorted out.
So I'm going to play that again because there was a lot in that video. In the meantime, though, let me introduce our most recent panelist to join. That's Black Steel. Black Steel, how are you this week?
I'm doing all right, Coco. How about yourself?
I'm good, man. Thanks for coming through as always.
How you doing, Buana?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I can't complain, man. Who's
Good.
gonna listen?
Good.
All right. So, like I said, I'll play it again. There was a lot there in that minute and a half or so. So I'll play it again, and then we'll discuss it.
You see the classism in Nigeria, yeah? Just too crazy. I saw this tweet, right, and it summed up perfectly everything I saw in Nigeria during my time there. And it's not exclusive to one thing. Like, you can literally see it between friends, families. Here, your status isn't just about what you have. It's literally about how you show it as well. I mean, just look at this ape. The way I've seen people talk to their drivers, their helpers, it's crazy. Like, these people are humans too. And it has to be said, man, a lot of well-off people there are just not nice. Like, it's just too clear. But you see, the thing is, yeah, it's like the system forces you to pick a side. Be the big man or get taken for granted. And let me tell you, I learned this the hard way on my trip to Nigeria. We had a driver. This guy was nice, very polite, solid guy, or so I thought. But he was new. So one day we asked him to wait for us after he dropped us at an event. Just wait. Tell me why my man decided to drive from the island to mainland to go and drop something off. So the car breaks down now, yeah? Called him to ask him where he was, and do you know what I heard? This guy was abusing me on the phone to the mechanic, calling me a fool and telling him I'm disturbing him. Not even sure he knew the phone was on or that I understood Yoruba, but that was all I needed. And that's the thing, I feel like you can't win here. If you're nice, they'll show you shaggy. If you're firm, they'll say you're mean. The system forces you to put on the front, to be harder, to be colder, to be tougher, just to avoid getting walked over. And you find that people come back home and start doing the same. And why not? Because it's what they see. And now it's created a system where everyone seems to be in survival mode all the time. Then you have both the top and the bottom ready to exploit each other. More often than not, the top win. And it's led to a culture where people just don't trust kindness anymore. To me, it doesn't have to be this way, but like, it's gonna take a long time to change. Like, respect shouldn't be about fear or money. It's about seeing people for who they are, not what they have. I don't know, that's what I just noticed when I was there. If you got different opinions, let me know. If you agree, let me know as well. One thing is clear though, it's clearly a problem and it needs to be sorted out.
Yes, indeed. So I just want to read some of the comments before I introduce the next panelist who's joined us. Some of the comments say Nigerians view empathy as a weakness. That's a fact that will never change for a long time. Another person says, you went to party and told driver to wait in the car and you think you're not mean? Someone else says Nigerians sound like krauts. Another person says valid, but some of these points are exclusive to Lagos and not Nigeria as a whole. Another person says, unfortunately, this is a fact.
You see the classism in Nigeria, yeah?
Sorry about that. So before we get into the discussion, let me introduce Kofi to the panel tonight. Kofi, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, man. I love that intro, man. I really do love that intro. It really showcases everybody that is a part of this show and how we need to branch out and see where you're getting all this talent from. I just love that intro. I really like that.
Yeah, thank
Thank you for having me.
yeah, thank you for that. I'm that now top of my thing. I gotta add you to that as well. I've been trying to figure out a way to include some other folks like Anthony and Black Steel and Buana to certain like promos for the show and stuff. So if you guys have ideas, man, forward them to me and I'll incorporate them. Um, with that said, shoot the brief topic number one: the effects of Nigeria as a Berlinist state. How accurate is this analysis, and does this explain why Nigerians have certain characteristics? I'll start with Buana on this one. Buana, what say you?
Can I'm sorry, can I interject real quick? Can I go first real quick? Because I'm in the car right now.
Sure,
I need to go in the
sure,
house.
sure, sure,
um
sure.
so I'll be brief. Um I don't particularly know Nigerian custom there on the continent. So when I speak to my Nigerian brothers and sisters, I am not speaking as an expert. Just going based upon this gentleman's experience. And what I would say to that would be, and Trigger Happy mentioned that. Oh, shout out to Trigger Happy. He was on my channel yesterday. I agree with what he was saying. It has to do with capitalism and us thinking that once you're rich and once you're an affluent person, that you're somebody. Is this survival of the fittest and the strong could just do whatever they want and run amok. So that is a problem. Someone says only something's only happening in Lagos. Maybe that may be the case, but you know when it sounds like they have this they got this mantra going on. Well, kindness is weakness, and that's very sad if that's the case. So just because you're an affluent person and you're rich doesn't mean that you're gonna be like that your whole life. Sometimes something happens to people to humble themselves. I've seen a lot of people, they're walking on sunshine, they're on the top, and next thing you know, just something that's just material, because they base off the materialism, like, you know what, I got this, so I'm better than you, and then something happens and then they lose it all. And at that moment, they become one of the most humblest people. Even when they get to where they need to go back, it humbles themselves. So I think they need to revamp, like really look at their culture and say, is this really a part of your culture? Is this something that you should be proud of? Because you have money, which means that I'm better than you. I mean, Nigerians are kind of like people from the Caribbean too, because people from the Caribbean say, oh, this person got a doctorate. So, Leroy know everything. Leroy could say this and Leroy could say that, and you can't say anything about Leroy. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to, that understand that having money and physical things doesn't make you a better person. So that's pretty much it.
I appreciate that, Kofi. Yeah, I agree. There's a snobbishness that does occur amongst our people in general. I think I don't know if Nigerians are some exception or exclusive, but I do think there's that goes on as well in the Caribbean. With that said, let me hear what Buana has to say. Buana, what's it?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know what this particular person was meaning when they say a Berlin estate. I don't know if he was referencing that to the Nazis and the fact that it's like if what he think is like a fascist kind of regime, or it's kind of like a socialist kind of situation. I don't know what he really meant by that. But what I would
No,
say is this.
I think it means the fact that it's a creation from that Berlin council. It's a creation. It's a state that's been created by their borders. So you know what I mean.
Oh, I got it. I got
So
it.
that's
I
what he
got
means.
you. I got you. Well, I have I've read a book by a Nigerian author called Man of the People, Chinua Achebe. And when I read that book, how the Nigerian society, it goes into kind of like detail in how the Nigerian society is set up and how they uh, venerate their leaders and the goings and comings and goings on in Nigeria. And when I read that book, For me, it was so familiar to what go on in my country. Let me deal with my country. I was like set aback by. I'm like, man, the Bahamas is just a smaller version of Nigeria, and I do believe that we have a lot of ideas and old values, old colonial values that doesn't necessarily fit into how black men should treat one another. Because in my country, they say, well, in Nigeria, they say weakness is no humility is weakness. In the Bahamas, we have a different kind of thing. We say when you find a donkey, you ride it. When you find a donkey, which means if you're a humble person, you could get taken advantage of and get over on, you know. And I don't know where we got this. I think that that's really more of a Nasuvian or a person from Nassau kind of philosophy as opposed to a person from the country where we say is the family islands. You know, I think that within those places, people exercise a little bit more humility and they don't mind being humble towards one another and respectful, as opposed to a smaller place. Well, see, you got to understand the setup of some of these societies. You got to understand the setup. If you put all the resources in a very refined space, small space, right? And then you put a bunch of people to compete for those limited resources, it's almost like you putting one piece of cheese in a cage with a bunch of rats. What do you think they're going to behave like? They're not going to be gracious with one another. And the colonial regimes and governments, they intentionally set up these societies in a way to where you are competing against each other rather than competing with the person who you should really be competing against, which is the person who set that kind of idea up. You have enough space in Nigeria and enough resources for everyone, but they put it in just a small space called Lagos. Like how they put it in a small space called Nassau, where everybody have to come to this small space to compete for limited resources. Of course, they're gonna act in a callous manner towards one another, and then you condition them in a way where they ain't thinking like African people no more. They thinking like European people. What do you think they're gonna do? I am. I used to be very critical of this society, and I still am from time to time. But I also recognize that Nigeria is still relatively a new country, and they have to work out a lot of things. I think that they gained their independence in 1966 or something like that, and I think that they have a long way to go. America, for where it is right now, it took hundreds of years of development, and I hope that African states and West or Caribbean states don't take that long, but they have to develop too, and it'll take a measure of time to do that. It won't happen overnight. And this particular gentleman, although he may be fair meaning in what he is saying, he is sitting in Britain and England, probably a Nigerian from the UK, and he have all the criticisms in the world about Nigeria. Sometimes it's not enough to criticize. Sometimes, if you can, you could also assist in making your country better as well, where you can. Where you can. I ain't saying you become the Nigerian president, but I'm saying where you could assist in helping your country become better. You should. And it's not all bad. I'm sure there are different aspects of Nigerian society that is very good as well. But these are never highlighted with all these criticisms, and I don't think that that's 100% fair. But I'll leave it there to let Black Steel go.
Appreciate that, Buana. In the chat, uh, Trigger Happy had a few things to say. In the chat, Trigger Happy says Nigerians in Ghana are seen as strong hustlers, but they are like that because Europeans have left behind a genocidal state that makes people destroy each other. He goes on to say, Berlinist. Why is this not doing it? He goes on to say Berlinist state means states created by the Berlin Conference. And then most recently he said, it just tells you how things have turned upside down. I feel that across the black world, we make a culture out of our extreme conditions, but they are merely extreme conditions. So with that said, Black Steel, you've heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to all of it?
Well, appreciate everybody's comment on this. I think what I'm seeing here is what an example of a Karl Marx's theory on alienation, right? So alienation results from the division of labor within a capitalist society. So long story short, I just want to say that we can see the treatment of different people of African descent in these capitalist countries, even if they're run by other Africans. We see the alienation that takes place from um, capitalism. So Marx's theory of alienation, I'm just going to quick read it from the Wikipedia. It says it describes the separation and estrangement of people from their work, their wider world, their human nature, and from themselves. And alienation is a consequence of the division of labor in a capitalist society where human beings' life is lived as a mechanical part of a social class. So basically, the people who are workers, they lose the ability to determine life and destiny when they're deprived of their right to think for themselves as a director of their own actions, right? So they don't direct their own actions. They just live to work. They just live to pay bills, and they can't um, attain those goods and services that they produce with their own labor. So even though they produce the labor, they're not able to access these things, and they become alienated. So this alienation takes place in the society where people are seen as value through their materialistic goods. The bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, they determine what's valuable in a society and what's not. Um, I think that this, when we see this behavior, and I think that this behavior isn't just within Africa, but because the capitalist system is at its highest level of exploitation in the form of neo-colonialism, right? For example, in the United States, capitalism is in charge, but there's still unions and worker protections that are in place, which is why so many capitalist industries export their labor to overseas, because the worker protections that we have in the U.S. don't exist overseas. So when you have the refinement of exploitive capitalism to its highest level in Africa and Latin America and so on and so forth. And we see that because there's no worker protections. There's no, you guys have the right to strike or things like that. So since that's in place, we're going to see a high level of alienation within the society. That's just my theory on it. I'd be willing to expound on it, but looking at it from what he's saying, how everything is viewed as materialistic. Oh, you don't have enough money. You haven't achieved this goal. I don't need to respect you. I don't believe that that is inherent within African people, right? We've always been a culture that loves outsiders, and we've accepted and extended our family towards everybody. So I think just when I'm talking about this right now, how alienation has impacted African people, I think this is a good example of that. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Coco.
I appreciate that, Black Steel. I really appreciate that breakdown from the Marxist viewpoint. Real quick, for everyone who's listening to my voice and our voice on the panel, if you can do me the favor, hit the like button, share the show on social media, let people know what you're tuned into on a Saturday night. Is there any last thoughts by Buana or Black Steel on any of this conversation?
Yes, yes.
All right. Okay, good.
Yeah, this may be off topic, but within these states as well, I want to comment on the behaviors and habits of the people within these states and how they look at it. Because Black Steel mentioned something that I believe to be very relevant. That you can't be perceived as a person who would have tried something and failed at it. It's like you always have to be this person who is 100% successful at something. It's interesting how the colonial mindset works, But if you look at the lives of highly successful individuals, they would have tried at something, they would have failed at something, they would have tried at something again, they would have failed at something, they would have tried something again, they would have failed at something. You can't be allowed to attempt something and not succeed at something within these kinds of societies for some reason. I don't know where that comes from, especially in how we treat each other. It's like, okay, this guy came home and he doesn't have $1 million. It doesn't work that way. Success is not a straight path. Has ups and downs, hills and valleys. Success is sometimes you attempt at things and sometimes you don't always become successful at it, but you have to keep trying. But it's interesting how the black mind is set to function because it stops him from or prohibits him from great success. Great success is not only an attempt and a success. It doesn't work that way. So usually, it's a man has tried 100 things sometimes, and 100 things are unsuccessful. But on that 101 thing that he tries, he becomes successful at it, and to he's able to impart and he's able to share that blessing with a million other people. And I think that within the societies, we are not allowed to explore the world, to attempt things and not succeed at things, but continue to try at things. And this is the reason why a good society becomes a great society. America, and I'm going to use this as an example, America had many successes, but it also had many failures in what has been done in its development. And I think that African societies need to be able to spread their wings and attempt things, even though sometimes it's not successful. And when I say African societies, I mean Caribbean as well. So I'll leave it there, Coco.
Bonnie over yard chicken.
No, no, that's a bird flying. That's a bird
Oh,
flying. I outside right now. Yeah, that's a bird.
yeah, yeah. Bonnie brings up a good point there. Actually, that's a very, 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 very good point. I'll be curious to know if Black Steel feels similarly, but coming from like the Caribbean, I can imagine the same is true for the Africans from the continent. There's this pressure, or is a burden actually that you have to be successful. Um, and if you ain't returning home, like Juana said, with $1 million, then what was you doing, kind of thing. And it's a very strange cultural aspect, but it's not so strange when you think about it in terms of the colonial mindset. So yeah, I'm curious, Black Steel, do you guys have that similar feeling?
Not really. And I would say
Oh,
because we also understand that, especially African Americans, that we're up against a system that has been set up to destroy us, had to keep us from attaining our goals. So it's good for you to strive for your goals, but if you don't make it, that don't mean you're a loser. It just means you try again. And we're all aware of racism and how it's been constructed to frustrate our efforts. So it's not seen as, oh, if you don't make it, it's on you. We're human. We all make mistakes. I'm just speaking for myself, and I'll say that I haven't heard that perspective where, what are you doing? As if you don't succeed, you have to succeed. Like, there's going to be setbacks. There's always, we can list plenty of people who've strived and tried to achieve, and they've fallen and they haven't succeeded. They keep back up again. It's just because I figure, it's a part of life, and we also understand that many of us understand, especially living in the U.S., that many people are literally one paycheck away from living on the street. So there's a understanding to that, especially amongst the conscious community. I can't speak for everybody, but most people understand you're closer to being homeless than you are to being a millionaire. So we have to take that into consideration as well.
that's a good point, Black Steel. It's true. I've picked that up over the years here too. Did Juana want to add something?
No, no, no. That's a good. Hey, when Black Steel mentions this, it takes a lot of pressure off the I guess in his perspective, in the African American perspective, it takes a lot of pressure off them. So they are free to attempt things, But with these colonial mindsets in the Caribbean and African countries, there's so much pressure. You always act in a very safe way. And what they say in investment, with no risk come no reward. Sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you have to not be risk averse. And I think that a lot of us in these Caribbean and African countries are risk averse. We do the safe thing. And then when you see your African American brothers flying, it's because some of them take great risk. So they have great reward. But as Black Steve was saying, maybe the pressure is not there. So the expectation is, okay, if I've tried something, we understand what it is. So let me attempt something else. And I think that that's a great thing. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, but I'll leave it.
Yeah, scared money don't make money. Yeah, and to add to that too, and I'll keep it brief so we can move to the next prompt. But like when you look at again the Caribbean and Africa and stuff like that, when you're coming up in the education system, you are basically told you have to be trying to become a lawyer, one doctor, engineer, business, that kind of thing. And again, that's another added pressure. You know what I mean? Why can't you be free to choose whatever it is, art, and, you know, uh, carpentry, or like why is it that pressure? And that all comes from a colonial mindset. I do believe so.
What I appreciate in this generation, though, because imagine, Coco. Now imagine your son coming to you or daughter, whoever, coming and you say, "Well, I don't want to be a doctor, or I want to be a YouTuber." In a colonial context, you gonna ask your son or daughter if they friggin' crazy. But the reality is, there's a YouTuber right now, and I'm not saying everyone is gonna have his success, but his name is Mr. Beast. This dude make like hundreds, I think maybe hundreds of millions, if not at least millions of dollars per month off of YouTube. Now, if you don't understand the technology, if you don't understand there's different industries that you could vary into, a person with a colonial mindset say, no, you are restricted for and this to make legitimate money. Even though me exploring and engaging in a technology that is above and beyond bounds, beyond what we used to, and he'll be able to make much more money. We'll say, well, he shouldn't risk that and make that attempt. Stay in the lane of this doctor, lawyer, engineer. It's just hilarious. It's hilarious, man. But I think that the next generation is gonna make us. I hope they don't make fools out of all of us. But I think that they'll be able to color outside the lines, as opposed to how we've been taught to color within the lines. And it'll be interesting to see where they take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's an African guy who's huge, KB Lame or something. He's huge from just doing YouTube stuff. Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. We gotta push past that colonial mindset and be more creative in our outlook for the future too. With that said, let's go to Shooter Breeze topic number two. Shooter Breeze topic number two says. Hold on. Shooter Breeze topic number two says. The genetic parameters of the black world. Could it be argued that genetics is used to quell the geopolitical scope black people could have? If you've been tuned in lately to the aforementioned Kofi broadcast he did last night and last week Friday, you'll understand where this prompt is coming from. So Kofi, if you're listening, I hope you'll join us if you have a chance to. Once we've begun this discussion. So this is a video. Let me make sure I'm sharing it properly. Yeah, I'm sharing it. This is a video. We'll watch it and then we'll discuss it.
Australia, and Melanesia have the special distinction of being the earliest locations on Earth settled by modern humans leaving Africa. Some of these groups of early Africans arriving in these regions as early as 100,000 years ago. These early Africans would have arrived in a very different looking South Asia and Austro-Melanesia. During the Paleolithic out of Africa migrations, instead of these regions consisting of several different islands, they were in fact two large conjoined land masses, known respectively as Sundaland and Sahul. Sundaland was connected to mainland Southeast Asia and contained modern countries like Bali, Borneo, Java, and Indonesia, where Sahul consisted of Australia and what is now the islands of Papua New Guinea. Even the islands of the Philippines were one landmass connected to Borneo. These early Africans that would make Sundaland and Sahul their new homes would go on to have one of the oldest continuous population histories outside of sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the things that is immediately noticeable about many of these modern populations in these areas is many of them still look black. Many of these populations, unlike many other regions around the world, have retained their ancestral sub-Saharan African phenotype. Outside of Africa, they're the only populations to retain this skeletal morphology. And it's not just their black skin color, but their actual cranial morphology. Remember, these traits are genetically inherited. Thus, they still have many of the traits of their African ancestors, such as pronounced amounts of alveolar prognathism, that wider nasal aperture, and that distinctive African long-headed dotiocephalic skull shape. There are several different major groups that make up these regions. One is the Negritos, a broad term that encompasses many of the native short-statured black peoples that are descended from the original African inhabitants of Sundaland. Some of these groups include the Onge, or the Andaman Islanders, the Aeta, and the Batak. These dark-skinned groups are often referred to as Orang Asli, or original peoples, by the lighter-skinned Mongoloid peoples that migrated into these regions during the late Neolithic. These groups also include indigenous Australians, referred to in modern day as Australian Aborigines, as well as the various groups of Papua New Guinea, such as the people of Bougainville, or the native Melanesian peoples of the Solomon Islands. These people are the descendants of the original African inhabitants of Sundaland and Sahul over 80,000 years ago. It's often been said, quite inaccurately, that the appearance and skin color of these South Asians and Australo-Melanesians is a coincidence, a fluke. They in fact look black on accident, a process of convergent evolution. This is a complete lie. These people have this skin color and this phenotype because of their ancestors. It is the skin color and phenotype of their ancestors from Africa. These groups arrived there with that skin color and that phenotype and have simply retained it over the millennia. We in fact know this because these people share several genetic variants, or SNPs, that are identical by descent with Africans, meaning that several portions of their DNA are the exact same as their African ancestors and their relatives in modern Africa. But before we touch on that, what exactly is an SNP? And what exactly makes groups of people related? Well, the first thing that should be understood is that all human beings, no matter where they're from, are 99.9% genetically identical. All human beings are from Africa and have black African ancestors. These were fully modern humans with speech and art and invention and technology that left the African continent and populated other regions of Afro-Eurasia. These were not hominids or pre-humans, but modern black human beings. This is why all human beings have nearly identical DNA, being 99.9% the same. That 0.1% accounts for all the differences we see amongst modern groups of people. These differences are caused by mutations that are known as SNPs or SNPs. These SNPs, or variations in DNA, account for differences like eye color or skin color or height or hair texture or certain diseases. Thus, we can say certain groups are related by their shared SNPs or genetic variants, as groups with certain mutations have a common set of ancestors. So, what causes these SNPs or SNPs? And what does it stand for? SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. Single, of course, means one, and nucleotides are the building blocks of your DNA. And polymorphism simply means change or mutation. To start off, your DNA is made up of 4 nucleotides, known as adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. These nucleotides attach to each other to forge chemical bonds known as base pairs, which connect 2 DNA strands. These base pairs are labeled as A, C, G, and T, and these base pairs serve as the instructions for coding proteins to make up your body, As a cell copies its DNA before dividing, it occasionally makes typos. So sometimes a single base pair will be substituted, deleted, or duplicated. And these changes or mutations in base pairs can have no effects or major effects. And these mutations or single nucleotide polymorphisms account for the major changes we see amongst human populations. These mutations, or SNPs, are then subsequently passed down to subsequent generations. Thus, we can trace the origin of populations by their shared polymorphisms, or SNPs. For example, let's take a look at the Y chromosome. All Y chromosomes originate in Western Central Africa. It's in these regions we find Y chromosomal Adam, the ancestor or father of all men and paternal lines that walk the earth. It's here in West Africa we find A00, the beginning of all paternal lines of Africa and of all paternal lines of the human race. To quote Fernando L. et al., we report the discovery of an African American Y chromosome that carries the ancestral state of all SNPs that define the basal portion of the Y chromosome phylogenetic tree. We sequenced 240 kb of this chromosome to identify private derived mutations on this lineage, which we named A00. We then estimated the time for the most recent common ancestor of the Y tree as 338,000 years ago. This is the beginning of the Y phylogenetic tree. All Y chromosomes are versions of this original Y chromosome. The only difference is they've acquired SNPs or mutations that allow us to tell them apart from the original Y chromosome. So a BY chromosome is simply an AY chromosome with additional SNPs or mutations that let us distinguish it from that original AY chromosome. Same thing with a CTY lineage. It's a version of a BT lineage with additional SNPs, namely mutation M168 and M294. Thus, all letters of the Y phylogenetic tree are simply a version of the preceding Y chromosome, just with additional SNPs or mutations. So, while we typically label the Y phylogenetic tree A through R, if we wanted, we could label it A0 through A17, because in fact, all Y chromosomes are a version of that original A with simple additional SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphisms. The first 6 mutations of the Y chromosome tree occur in Africa, namely A, B, C, D, E, and F. All of these Y chromosomes have an African origin. Then Africans carrying one branch of haplogroup D and haplogroup CF will leave out the African continent and subsequently populate the rest of the world. And it's important to know the people that left Africa were still very much African, and they very much looked African for thousands and thousands of years. And in some cases, they still do look African. I think people have this idea in their head that once people left Africa, they stopped being related to black people and people in Africa, which is not the case at all. As people migrated into new regions, they simply accumulated different mutations. But I can't state this enough. The mutations that happen inside of Africa are no different than the mutations that happen outside of Africa. They're all simple mutations on the exact same original African genome. So, as I said, we can see how certain populations are related by their shared SNPs, or SNPs. For example, sickle cell anemia is caused by a very specific SNP. This switch, or nucleotide polymorphism, causes a mutation in the protein that makes the red blood cells, causing many of the patient's blood cells to take a rigid sickle shape. And of course, these alleles, or SNPs, spread out in large numbers during the age of the Green Sahara. Thus, all peoples with sickle cell, whether they live in Africa or Eurasia, have a shared West African ancestry. So, while a mutation like sickle cell causes changes we can see on the inside of the body, some of these mutations, or SNPs, cause changes we can see on the outside of the body, such as skin color. So, for example, The SMP that causes light skin is only about 20,000 years old, and that mutation won't become widespread into regions like Europe till the Indo-European migration around 5,000 years ago. Whereas the mutation for light skin in East Asians is a little different, being only about 6 to 12,000 years old. So both of the typical light skin phenotypes we usually associate with both Europeans and East Asians are very new and caused by very recent mutations or polymorphisms and subsequent migrations of peoples from colder regions. For example, the mutation that causes depigmentation in East Asians is located on a completely different part of the genome than Europeans, namely the OCA2 gene on the 15th chromosome. Remember, SNPs are simply mutations in base pairs, made up of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. These base pairs are read off in triplets known as codons, and of course changes in these instructions, in these base pairs of A, C, G, and T, and how they're read, causes changes that we can sometimes visibly see in people. In this case, it causes changes in skin color. To quote Murray, two OCA2 polymorphisms, RS1800414 and RS746533330, have been associated with pigmentation in East Asians. We explored the distribution of these markers in a panel of samples from populations around the world. The derived allele of RS1800414 has high frequencies in a broad East Asian region, whereas the derived allele of RS746533330 is primarily restricted to northern East Asia. The haplotype analysis suggests that the haplotypes carrying the derived alleles for each polymorphism arose independently from the same ancestral haplotype, using the markers RS7170451 and so on to define the haplotype block. Our results indicate that from the ancestral haplotype AAGAGCAGGTT, or adenine, adenine, guanine, adenine, guanine, cytosine, adenine, guanine, guanine, thymine, thymine, a non-synonymous mutation at RS1800414 originated the haplotype AGGAGCAGGTT, or adenine, guanine, guanine, adenine, guanine, cytosine, adenine, guanine, guanine, thymine, thymine. And another non-synonymous mutation independently originated the haplotype AAGAGCAAGTT, or adenine, adenine, guanine, adenine, guanine, cytosine, adenine, adenine, guanine, thymine, thymine. Both derived haplotypes then increased in frequency in different regions of East Asia. The haplotype AGGAGCAGGTT is now the most common haplotype in a broad region of East Asia, whereas the haplotype AAGAGCAAGTT has become the most prevalent in northern East Asia. Several lines of evidence indicate that this increase in frequency may have been the result of positive selection favoring light skin in high latitude regions. Both the derived alleles are non-synonymous variants predicted to have a functional effect, and both have been associated with lighter skin pigmentation in East Asian populations. In addition, several studies have identified signatures of positive selection in the OCA2 region in genome-wide scans in East Asian populations. The geographic distribution of the variant strongly suggests that these two mutations arose after the separation of European and East Asian populations. This is supported by a recent study that dated the derived G allele of the OCA2 RS1800414 polymorphism to 10,000 years ago. To our knowledge, there has been no attempt to date the polymorphism RS746533330. We used the dense genome-wide SMP data available for the HGDP CEPH panel to estimate the ages of the derived alleles at RS1800414 and RS746533330 in East Asian populations. We used a method that relies on the decay of haplotype sharing of the ancestral genomic segments on which the derived mutations occurred. Under these conditions, and assuming a generation time of 29 years, we estimated the age of the derived allele at RS746533330 to be 6,835 years old, with a 95% confidence interval between 1,070 and 12,798 years ago. The estimated age of the derived allele at RS1800414 is quite similar, at 6,397,000 years ago, with a 95% confidence interval of 1,183,000 years ago and 11,446,000 years ago. Recent ancient DNA studies, which have characterized dense genomic data in Eurasian individuals spanning a broad archaeological period, e.g., from hunter-gatherers to individuals living in the Bronze Age, have provided important information about the temporal distribution of genetic markers associated with pigmentation variation in Europe, and have strengthened the case for selection operating in the pigmentation-related genes in this region. Similar studies in East Asia have the potential to clarify the major events that have shaped the interesting distribution of the two non-synonymous variants of the OCA2 gene in this vast area. In this respect, it will be important to consider not only potential selective effects, but also the major population movements that have taken place in this region during the past 15,000 years. And this brings us back to the peoples of South Asia and Australo-Melanesia. As I said earlier, these people are unique amongst populations living outside of Africa, as they've retained their ancestral African phenotype and skin color. And as I said, this is not due to coincidence or convergent evolution, but their shared African ancestry with their relatives in the African continent, having several shared SNPs or genetic variants that are identical by descent with Africans, namely mutations on several genes such as DDB1 on the 11th chromosome, OCA2 on the 15th chromosome, and TMIM138 on the 19th chromosome. These are only a few of the shared SNPs between Australo-Melanesians and African populations. These specific mutations only being shared by these two populations. To put it in layman's terms, they look African because they're from Africa, even though they don't reside there currently. For example, this is me as a little kid, and my sister, and my dad, and my cousin. And these are Papuans and Aborigines and Melanesians. Why do we all look alike? Why do we all look like family? Why do we all look like we're related? That's because we all have the same genetic variants. We all have the exact same ancestral African SNPs dictating our phenotype. To quote Crawford, individuals from South Asia and Australo-Melanesia share variants associated with dark pigmentation at MFSD12, DDB1, TMM138, OCA2, and HERC2 that are identical by descent from Africans. This raises the possibility that other phenotypes shared between Africans and some South Asian and Australo-Melanesian populations may also be due to genetic variants identical by descent from African populations, rather than convergent evolution. This observation is consistent with a proposed southern migration route out of Africa 80,000 years ago. Alternatively, it is possible that light and dark pigmentation alleles segregated in a single African source population, and that alleles associated with dark pigmentation were maintained outside of Africa only in the South Asian and Australo-Melanesian populations, due to selection. So, as we can see, the appearance of these populations is not from coincidence, but their actual African ancestry and shared African genetics. So now that we know that, when exactly did people first arrive in Sundaland and Sahul? When did the African ancestors of the Australo-Melanesians first arrive?
Okay. So that video was a bit lengthy. I could have sped it up. Maybe I should have sped it up. But one of the things about the video I do appreciate is he's being thorough. What I mean by that is he's trying to basically explain it like you're in school, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to explain things thoroughly and show the connections. And that's what he did there when he was giving you the science of DNA and base pairs and codons. I think the most important thing he said in that video before this last 2 minutes or so is that point mutations, the mistyping of one base in a DNA sequence, a point mutation that can have zero effect, or it can have huge effect. And I think that's understanding. I think that's important to understand because it tells you that black people are, in fact, or African people are, in fact, a spectrum, right? You can have zero effect. Well, that means you stay your African self, or it can have huge effect, which means you could go all the way to white or light skin or what have you. So I think that's important to understand. But I think also what's important too is something I saw Trigger say during one of Kofi's episodes. I think it was yesterday even. Um, you can't just go by genetics alone, obviously, because if you go by genetics, then white folks have a claim to Africa, right? But what is the geopolitics associated with those genetics? That's what would more so make us black equals African, right? So I think that's an interesting conversation. So I hope that everyone could kind of piece that together from the presentation, albeit that it was long. But he was trying to be informative and show you the connections between DNA, between genetics and phenotypes, etc. With that said, I forgot to bring in my brother Kofi, but I'm sure you could hear while he was backstage. I'll get to Kofi last on this one because this relates to what he was recently talking about. I'll start with Buana on this. Buana, what say you to Shooter Breeze topic number 2?
Okay, so I'll try it this way because let me just put this out there. The genetics conversation is not my lane, but I am glad that Koku was able to translate some of that stuff for me just now. I mean, what would it take for him to do that in 1 minute? The 9-minute video, I was glad that it was a translator in the house that was able to clear up a lot of things. How I'm hearing this discussion though, from both, I have questions, and I would probably take it at a position of questions because as I heard the discussion yesterday, what the brothers were saying is that yes, these people did come from Africa, but the fact that they were removed from Africa for more than thousands of years makes them kind of different from us and how we relate to our blackness or Africanity. That's what if I now Kofi could correct me on that, but that's what I'm hearing from them. Okay, that's out of the scope of that argument. Since they've been removed and cut off and not really been involved in anything in terms of African or African affairs for thousands of years, that removal causes a degree of a separation. The other side of that argument is, I physically was seeing these brothers, some of these Melanesian brothers, in particular the leader of Vanuatu. Um, Anthony McFall referenced the brother's name from Vanuatu, who is the leader. And he looked like a Guyanese. He looked like a Bahamian. He looked like an American. I mean, straight up, Afro and all. So, and also their politics at the time was similar with our politics. Now, that politics could be the same because of both of us have the same similar colonial past. The Vanuatu was a colonial state. The UK, I'm thinking, and with the Caribbean countries, Great Britain was all over the world doing that development. So I understand that in terms of our politics, in terms of subjugation and that aspect of it, there would be some familiarity, there would be some brotherhood because our past would be similar. Okay, but the problem I have now, the question I have now is, I would ask the other side to show me the cultural similarities. Show me the fact that these people in Vanuatu and the Melanesian Islands culturally are similar to the cultural goings on in West Africa. I want to see the nexus. I want to see the pairing. I want to see the connection. This is the question I have for them. Also, what I would say, ask Kofi them is, because Kofi them, that argument is very similar to the FBA argument. Very similar. Because the FBA argument said that, okay, we've been removed from Africa for 400 years. We have another different ethnogenesis. This is what they say. So we are different. We are different in those regards in terms of the African world right now. We don't have nothing to do with the Africans because we have a different ethnogenesis considering we've been in this part of the world for 400 years. So now I'm asking the brothers, how long does it take for that cutoff period to say, well, since we've been removed for a certain amount of time, there is no real cultural, there is no real connection, there is no real founding and saying that blackness or Africanity is similar or the same as one another. How long? Because some of the brothers, what I'm hearing from Kofi, them is they say with thousands of years of a disconnect makes them different. The FBA brothers say, well, 400 years makes them different. So I'm asking, how long does this cutoff take for us to become a new founded group of people in the world, separate and apart from the African race or African culture or whatever you want to define it as? So this is the questions I would put out there. Like again, the genetics conversation is not my lane. I am just in the questioning side of the argument. But I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
Good stuff, Juan. I'll look forward to what Kofi has to say. But let me first get to Black Steel's thoughts on this. Black Steel, what are your thoughts on what you just saw?
Well, I'll be honest with you, man. I did not like this video. This level of highly technical language is a barrier for a layman's understanding. You should be able to explain things in such a way that I don't know if you could explain it to a 10-year-old, I could explain Marx's alienation theory to a 10-year-old. But this right here is a turnoff to me. I mean, I started playing Mario Kart, man. I couldn't get into it. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Koku, trying to, bridge that gap. Ultimately, in my feelings of this, I've always thought of race as a social construct. I'm not so much into the genetics of things to where the social construct of race is more important. Because these Aboriginal Australian people, these Melanesian people, there's a reason why when the Spanish or the Dutch came to the island, they called it New Guinea because the inhabitants of the island look similar to the people of Guinea in Africa. So I think that based on our shared history, um, the violence they've experienced, the racism, for example, it was an ethnic cleansing of Aboriginal Australians, right? The It's known in history as the Black War, not the Aboriginal War. It's called the Black War because they were just seen as black people. I know they're not African, right? I don't expect them to go return to Africa on some large Pan African project, but I also understand that they are a people who are oppressed people, and who we in the African diaspora should stand in solidarity with them, based on our experiences. Um, that's where I'll leave it there. I don't want to get too much in detail, but I do think that many of uh, Aboriginal people, Austronesian, Melanesian people have found like strength in the African struggle. I mean, I've seen Aboriginal people who are Rastafarians. I've seen pictures of Marcus Garvey and they spoke out for George Floyd when he was murdered because those same systems that oppress us as African people also oppress them as well. So I think if I can take anything from the video, it's the larger need of solidarity for oppressed people globally, because the truth is the matter is we outnumber them, right? And it's only through their propaganda system and their ability to organize violence against us, and they're able to dominate and control us. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Black Steel. So, Kofi, you've heard everything everyone else has had to say, and I know you've done 2 recent episodes on a similar topic. So I'm going to give you a chance to expand and respond to whatever it is you feel like you need to address. All right, so take your time and go ahead.
Um. So let me. I kind of laugh when Black Steel say he started playing Mario Kart. That was just funny to me. That was funny to me. But he does have a point saying like, if you're this is something I love science, I love history, I love those things. So you have to have a passion for these things. Now I'm not an expert in in genetics or anything like that, but I have what we would say I understand the fundamentals and layman's terms of it. So this video, he said, and I said this in the last two broadcasts. He's doing this with a black romanticism. And what we were attacking was the misinformation of Hidden Colors. Hidden Colors is a mixed bag. And what he's doing is the mixed bag because he's doing this black romanticism where black people were all the same. We circumnavigated the whole neighborhood in 2-3 generations, which is total bullshit. Anthropologically speaking, we have proof of that. So I'm going to go down the line of some of the things that he said that was just totally just nonsense. So he said, I don't know what he called it. He said basically the reason he showed you, you know, I love the map that you have right there. It's perfect. He's saying people left in the Great Lakes region, which is in East Africa, which is in Kenya, right? And you can see the
Well,
migrational
the
path.
three groups that left.
Yes, he's absolutely right. No, what you had there was good. And he said the three groups left Africa. So when he says three groups, I don't know if he said it. Three groups. When he says three groups, so there's more genetic diversity in Africa than anywhere else in the world combined. So when they say three groups left Africa, only three different genetic groups left Africa. Out of those three genetic groups that left Africa, they were mutations. So a mutate. So if you're mutating from one thing to the next, you're not that same thing. But he mentioned that. So that's why he's talking in circles. Another thing that he doesn't understand that made no sense. He said there was a land. He said land. He said there was a land bridge where all these people left Africa, went through the so-called Middle East, Iberian Peninsula, went into India. So they're in Asia now. They're in China, and from China, in southern China, they just walked to Papua New Guinea and Australia. He is full of shit. He's talking the last supercontinent on Earth was Pangea. That's 250 million years ago. You had several supercontinents, and they happened over millions of years. I think it was Gondwana, then Pangea was the last one. Mankind is only about 300,000 years old. What the hell is he talking about? That's how I know that. Anyway, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Certain things he knows what he's talking about, but then he contradicts himself later. That doesn't make any sense, right? Um, man. So that alone is
Can I interrupt? Real quick.
yeah.
Yeah, I finally started understanding what the fuck people talk about. So now I get. So I think the comment about the landmass, right? So there was a point in history, especially during the last ice age, when much of the Earth's water was
And, and
cold.
how many years ago was that? That was 10,000 years ago, correct?
But there's been more than one ice age, though.
Yeah,
The
but I'm
most
talking about
recent
the
ice age,
last one. The last one was
most recent was
10,000
about
years ago.
10,000 years ago. But if you go back a little bit further, the ocean levels were a bit lower. So what they're saying is like the same. For example, the same when they talk about the Bering Land Bridge between Siberia and Alaska, right? Because the water levels are a little bit lower, there were some parts of land were exposed that aren't exposed now. Like much of Florida, Florida was a lot bigger than it is now. Much of Florida was underwater, but then it was bigger because the sea levels were lower at certain points in history. So
Absolutely correct, and that's what I was going to say. He meant to say during the ice age, most of North and South, the northern hemisphere was mostly encapsulated in ice. So most of the world's water was in ice. So that exposed a lot of land, and you had land bridge. But the Negroes said, it was a supercontinent. It was all the continents were together. I'm like, no, not all the continents were together. That's not true. It was due to the ice age, so some people walked through it. So but when it comes to Australia, Australia is still of a bit of a conundrum because even though there was no land bridges, the sea level was not low enough for people to walk to Australia. From what I researched last, those people actually canoed there. Like they don't know what happened. The theory is saying maybe they saw like a fire or something, maybe like a big fire that was over there. So there's okay, there's a fire there where there's smoke, there's fire, so there have to be land there. You know what I'm saying? As far as Australia goes, but yeah, Black. So you're absolutely right. But if I'm not mistaken, he said supercontinent. But all he said all of the landmass was together. That's simply not true, right? So all right, so he spoke about okay. One thing he says mutations out of Africa and in Africa are the same. So why are you talking about SMPs, RNA, DNA, giving you certain information in your body, right? So DNA and RNA will tell you basically what. So if you have okay, so a European that you had those people that went from left Africa went to Europe. Those people are obviously African, right? But they also met with the Neanderthals. So that also changed their DNA, right? But even if they did, which they did, they would have changed the environment. One thing he did not mention was environment. Environment causes your genes also to mutate, right? So if you're in Europe, right? It makes no sense for your skin to be dark because it's not advantageous to you if you were in Africa or anywhere near the equator where your body blocks the UV rays and changes it to vitamin D. If you're further north, right, that is a detriment to you. So what you got to do, you got to turn your pigmentation off because where you are, you're getting less sun. If for all you don't know, more sun, you get more sun when you're at the equator or near the equator. If you go further north or south of the equator, you'll be getting less sun. So as far as north as they went, they're getting less sun. So they had to mutate. They have a gene. They had that gene that controls pigmentation and controls melanin was turned off pretty much because white people still have melanin. Believe it or not, they still have melanin. They're extremely melanin deficient, but they still have melanin, right? So if he's saying all these things, my question to him would be, so how you're saying the mutation is not different in and out of Africa? He's talking in circles. He's talking in circles, and I think his problem is because he's trying to do this romanticization of black people were everywhere, and we really didn't change. If that's the case, why don't we befriend the light-skinned, white-looking Chinese man? If that's what he's saying, why are you going to only say, well, these people are black, right? Because they look black like me. And the problem that we're having is that we don't understand that phenotype always doesn't necessarily mean genotype. Just because someone looks like you doesn't mean they're directly like you. You have to study life science. You have to study earth science. There are species of plants and animals that look the same, sometimes inhabit the same area, but genetically they're different. Humans aren't different from those plants and animals. Like I said, you have the African elephant and you have the Asian elephant. They all have the same forest features. They still have tusks. They have the trunk. Everything's the same. But guess what? An Asian elephant, fully grown, is extremely smaller than the African elephant. What happened? The African elephant on savanna could grow as big as they can. Why? Because there's nothing there cluttering them, right? Versus the Asian elephant is in the jungle. So being that big, it's to your detriment. You need to get around. How are you being that big? And that's what he's not mentioning. He's not mentioning environment. Also, are catalysts to why there are changes. Another thing he mentioned. Hold on a second here, because I was writing things down. I want to be thorough, and because Wanda asked a question. Yeah, I did the whole ask. So okay, so another thing he said about Y chromosomes. And this is how again he's double talking. So yes, he's right. Y chromosome was found in Africa. That's through the woman. That's through the woman. So he's talking about mitochondrial Eve, right? He said The Y chromosome you can trace back to Africa, but there's also different variations of the Y chromosome. Why are there different variations of the Y chromosome? Because it changed once you went out of Africa. So you're not the same person. You're not the same thing because that Y chromosome changed. That Y chromosome didn't stay the same. If anyone understands, put like this, an Excel spreadsheet, or a tree, or a food pyramid, or or life cycle, how you have the bear that eats the fish, and you have then you have another fish that eats another fish. Then that fish is it everything is connected. You have just be Everything is connected, right? So if you're saying that this person over here in Malaysia or in Papua New Guinea or in Hawaii, yeah, they have a Y chromosome, but it's not the same Y chromosome as the one they have in Africa, but they can trace it back to the original one. You just said that it's not the same thing. And this is and this is the problem that we're having. I mean, this guy, whoever this guy is, he should understand that. But I think like his romanticization of painting the whole world black is, I think he's being blocked by that. So finally, he also said, hold on, mutations occur outside of Africa early as 80,000 years more or less. Okay, so let's take what he's saying, right? So if you have that map up right there, you see the Iberian Peninsula right there, right? Mutations started happening. There's haplogroups. A haplogroup are basically groups of people that share a similar share similar genes out of those three genes that left, right? So those three genes that left, they're just mutating as people go on, and they're just splitting off into each other, only genetically turn to different groups. They may look the same, they may not look the same, but genetically they are different because they are mutating as they're going, because they're with different people, they're with different within different environments. So take India and people in the Iberian Peninsula, those DNAs are still around today, right? So you got the untouchables, you got the Dravidians, right? Those are our closest genetic relatives. Are you or him going to tell me those people look exactly like us? No, you're not. So what are we talking about here? Even if I do the whole, oh, they look like us thing, right? They are our closest genetic relatives. But we all know, you put a Indian man and a black man in there, no one's gonna say, "Well, I can't tell." This is lunacy. This is lunacy. This absolutely makes no sense. So I think, yeah, okay, I already discussed that. As far as S&P's DNA, it gives you information. It turns off information. DNA, RNA. It tells you. And I think he spoke about sickle cell, which is very interesting. Only certain Asian types people have sickle cell, but mostly sickle cell anemia only affects black people. I told them the story last time of when my daughter was first born, right? I took her to it was a white pediatrician. Looked at her, says she's fine, but what's this stuff on her butt? It was like some type of pigmentation. Long story short, he didn't know what it was. We took him to a black doctor, and he's like, "Oh, that's nothing. Black children get that." My daughter was like extremely light skinned, and they was like, "Oh, black people get that." Like, what is that? That's called Mongolian spots. People that are black and certain people from Asia, they would get that. We all get that. So, to his point, and other people's point, yes, there are certain things that we would share genetically due to our phenotype, right? But that doesn't actually mean it's the same. So why they don't get high concentrations of sickle cell anemia like we do? There's specific genetic diseases that only certain people get. So we all are not the same. Another pet peeve, and I'll bring it home because I know I'm keep going on. I'll answer Ronald's question. One thing that I don't think he's alluding to this, but my pet peeve when we're talking about human migration, where people say, "Well, we all came from Africa, we all came out of Africa," and we all know that's not true. A white man did not walk out of Africa. A Chinese man did not walk out of Africa. A Native American did not walk out of Africa. To me is intellectual laziness. that when people would say that. So to Bwana's question, which is a very, very good question, because I think him and Brother Macari is on the same page. He was like, hey, okay, you guys kind of sound like FBA right now. Yada, yada. We're not the same. You're not like us. You're not like us. Yada, yada, yada. So what's the difference between you and FBA, and what's the cutoff for when you're quote unquote not like us? So that's the thing about science and human evolution, right? We could estimate when it was. It's not down to the exact number when a change is going to occur. I read an article a while back. You have African elephants that will no longer. This is why I say God is in nature. God is in nature. There were these African elephants, and they were no longer growing tusks. What? They're full grown. Why did not growing tusks? And no one knew why some of these elephants were no longer growing tusks. And someone said, "Wait a minute. When you have certain species, right? They have like take birds for instance. If a bird is eating seeds, its beak is going to be shaped a certain way for it to eat seeds. But let's say the particular seeds that is eat is not advantageous to it, and it has to go eat nectar. Then it'll be like a hummingbird, and its beak is going to change. So I'm saying that to say maybe the elephant is like, wow, we're being decimated because we have our tusks. So somewhere in the elephant, this is why I can't explain why. No one to explain why. This is how nature works. You know what? In order for me to survive, this is all you want for me to survive, then I won't produce it. So I'm gonna walk around and I'm not gonna have a tusk. So there's no real number for that when the cutoff is, when people change, plants change, it could do to an environment. It could be due to a new food source. It could be anything. It could be numerous things. So the difference between what we're saying and why we're different than FBA, what we're saying about the people from Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, we are saying that these people are genetically different from us. We're not like FBA where we're gonna dehumanize them and make up a word for them to dehumanize them and subjugate them. No, that's not what we're doing. What we are saying, right, from a scientific standpoint, we're not talking political. We're not talking. Well, their culture may be the same and all this. We're talking genetically. They are not the same because they've been far removed from us for 1,000 years. That's all we're saying. FBA, the argument that FBA has is saying, well, you're not like, well, we're the same because you're from Africa, right? And their claim is too because the FBA doesn't even make any sense because they think that the black people came to America, right? And that there was no something we spoke about this before. There's something called the Atlantic slave trade, where they were trading black people from the Caribbean to the Americas back and forth, especially after slavery was eradicated, right? So we are direct descendants from continental Africa, right? We were in the same groups. We were West Africans. We're not East Africans. We're West Africans. So West Africans have been converting with each other the whole time. So there's not going to be that much of change, even though we have a lot of genetic diversity within the continent of Africa. So there's no change. And it's only been 400 years. So when you say FBA is making the same claim that they went through Afrogenesis, their Afrogenesis is white people. If you listen to them talk, the only difference between them and us is their proximity next to white people. Oh, so we're different because yeah, you're still a direct descendant. Just because I forgot the name of this doctor. He's an educator. He said, hey, if you were to have, let's say you're on Delta Airlines. It was a brother in the Afro in a suit, and he's teaching kids. Let's say you're on Delta Airlines and you and your wife is pregnant, right? And you leave New York to go to France, and your wife goes into labor in the middle of the Atlantic, right? What is your child? What do you call your child? Is your child, if you're on Delta Airlines, your child you're gonna call your child Delta Airlines? You're gonna call your child well, you're the Atlantic Ocean? No, based upon who your parents are and who you were, you do not change. What FBA does is say, well, We don't want anything to do with Africa, even though when we take our DNA test, we have high concentrations of African, and they'll move the conversation into, well, yeah, we're African, but we went through ethnogenesis in what way? Well, we went through ethnogenesis culturally. Okay, totally agree. African Americans have remnants of African culture and European culture. That's it. That doesn't change you genetically. How does that change you genetically? You could be a nigga in a kilt playing bagpipes, drinking whiskey. Does that change you genetically? So the FBA argument is just sad and it's poor. We're not trying to divide people. We're trying to say, genetically speaking, there is a division. Now, if you guys want to talk about, well, hey, look, you got these guys from Papua New Guinea. They were a part of the Pan-African Conference and things like that. That is good. That is cool. I'm not saying you guys may cast me out of this group for this, but if you have a group of good white people that say, hey, look, I believe in the struggle of Pan-Africanism, what can I do to facilitate to help you? That's fine too, right? But that is a little bit different than the people from Papua New Guinea because they're being chastised for how they look. Now, this is another thing that I wanted to mention. When he's going around saying, quoting European people that don't know, that this is before the age of science and genetics and everything. They saw everything and say, "Oh, you black," like Black Steel says, "Oh, okay, you these people from Guinea." So maybe there's some people in the Twa people and the Pygmy people. Oh, they're short like you. Okay, so you two must be the same thing. And y'all are going based upon what some uneducated racist white man is saying that didn't care about their culture, they didn't care about who they were, their language to bridge this gap to say these people are the same. They only went according to phenotype. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, I'll land it here. I don't know because I know I went on a little bit too long. I mean, I'll take questions.
No, good stuff. Good stuff. I wanted you to address it. You'll see. I don't know if you noticed while you were talking, there was a lot of commentary coming from Trigger Happy and a few others while you were speaking. So, you could address that to them in the chat as well. Want to shout out real quick the matron. I saw the matron in the chat tonight. I saw Provide Triggers for Evolution in the chat tonight. I also saw Afro Native World out there, and KW Dawn 7 is out there as well. I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. Make sure to hit the like button for us. Hit the like button. Let's get the likes equal to the number of views going on tonight. With that said, let me throw it back to the panel. Does anyone want to address anything Kofi would have said just now?
I thought Kofi was thorough.
In the
I
chat,
thought he was good. Yeah, I thought
go ahead,
Kofi
Wanda.
was.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought Kofi was thorough. I thought he was good in writing down a lot of the stuff and addressing the specific points. I thought that was a good idea. Kofi addressing the whole FBA thing and why it's different. He is talking in terms of genetics, and FBA is talking in terms of something different. So I'm glad that he was able to clear up some of the questions that I had. He did a good run. Good run.
I mean, I also want to say, again, I really want to drive this home that it is it's okay to seek solidarity with people that's in the same struggle with you. There's nothing wrong with that, especially from the people from Papua New Guinea. But again, let's have an alternate reality. Let's say Britain and France never took over Papua New Guinea, right? And we went over there, or they went over there and to Africa here, and they saw us. They would not have any solidarity with us at all. They'll just see us like, okay, you're just a Nigerian, you're just an African American, you're just that. The thing that make them a part of our family and everything is the subjugation of white people and them treating them bad, and then treating them bad like how they treated us. That's where the solidarity that we have. So that's all that we're saying. When it comes to that, that is perfect. That is perfectly fine. But it's very dangerous. You guys gonna go to somewhere in the Philippines and you're gonna see a dark skinned Filipino and say, "My brother," like go ahead if you want, because they're not gonna reciprocate you in the same fashion. You're gonna go to Bali and India and say and look and look at the darkest Indian that looks like Wesley Snipes, and we would go over and say, "You're my brother." They're gonna look at you like you're mad, and they have every right to, because you two are just the same phenotypically. That's it. I'll land my plane there.
Yeah, I think it's important. Afro Native World was engaging us in the chat earlier, and he asked a question if it's just phenotype. I also said it's about your politics and philosophy, and he came back and said, okay, so phenotype and ideology, and I think ultimately that's what it's about too. I think the argument that Trigger Happy tends to make about this topic is you can't just go off of genetics alone, right? What's the cultural connection? What's the geopolitical connection? What's the ideology? So that question, whenever it comes up for folks who are listening, and you hear the question come up, what is black? In fact, I think the To Be Fair show, like a week or two ago, was talking about this as well. Um, the thing to remember is not just skin folk as kin folk. What you really got to remember is you have to factor in that ideology. You have to factor in that ideology. So I think when a lot of folks was talking about Papua New Guinea, they were also not just going off of the phenotype, but also the ideology of being Pan African and a part of a Pan African struggle. So I think that's really yes.
No, that is true. That's why we're talking. If people were like making these broad claims, we're just talking genetically, right? And even though some people may say, well, hey, they're part of the Pan African family and they have the same struggle. People that say that still are making an argument that the Jarawa people and the Negritos in the Philippines are just as black as them, so we have the same solidarity as them, which is not true. I'm just talking genetics. Period. That's all. Anything else you're talking about, as far as like politics or anything, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genetically speaking. You can want to talk about the culture, you want to talk about the geopolitics, that is fine. But we're talking about specifically genetically speaking. So if I'm talking about genetics and they say, well, you can't just judge a group of people based on their genetics, that's fine. I am. I'm only talking about genes. That's all I'm doing. I'm just talking about genes. So if you want to look at the people of Papua New Guinea and say, well, they're also our brother in arms because we have the same enemy, that's fine. But that's not what I'm talking about. And we have to distinguish when we say blackness, we're talking phenotype. That's it. They're not African. They are not African. They're hundreds of thousands of years removed from being African, and you see that in their genes, as well as I would go as far as say, as well as in their culture. So Wanda says, and he said it on the show last night, they're doing this hidden color stuff. Oh, so you had people in a particular area in Asia that had like the rings around their neck, and there's people in Africa do the same thing. Okay, show me the connection where they did that, right? They also claim they made on Hidden Colors. Dr. Ricardo Rashidi said, someone told me that that they used to go and in times of war, they went to Africa to get people from Africa. Well, that's logistically impossible. Oh, or the Buddha, his hair is Nati hair. Everyone knows about the story of Buddha, he's an Indian man and his hair is not Nati, it was curls. It was actually curls. So again, it's black romanticism, and we have to kind of like learn for things for ourselves, because this is what people are regurgitating and just telling us. But I'll just land the plane right there so we go to the next topic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it. I think I forgot to shout out Cheryl earlier too when I was giving out the shout outs to people who joined the program since we began. I'll give Cheryl, I guess, the last word here. She says, let's just focus on Africa. There's enough damage on the continent that we have to sift through there. These other places with dark skinned people don't even have Africa on their minds. And I appreciate that comment. Trigger Happy had a bunch of other commentary. You guys who are listening to the playback or who's here on the panel, you guys can scroll through the comments and check those out. In the meantime, though, let's go to Shoot the Breeze. What are we on now? Shoot the Breeze topic number 3. Let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 3 then. Shoot the Breeze topic number 3 says, sorry, that's not it. Shoot the Breeze topic number 3 says, Black identity or African identity, the most updated position on our geo-cultural identity and the parameters of the Black world by Obenfo Obadele Kambon. So this takes us to YouTube. Let me share it with you guys. So what we'll do is we'll watch it, and then we will comment on it.
Saying, and I just want to make sure I hear you, because you know this was a lot of information, and I want to make sure that I understand your main point. You're like, hold up, first of all, you saying that if we want to I guess own or define our identity, you said we got to start even with the landmass itself, right? Mm-hmm. Referring to ourselves as African, you're saying that that's problematic. That's your argument. You're saying that the use of the word African is problematic. So let me ask you this. Would you rather folks say, would you rather folks say Black people? I know we still speak in English, but would you rather, if we're not using our indigenous tongues, because you got a lot of people who don't know the indigenous tongues, they don't know the language like you know it. Would you rather them say Black people than African, or you lump them both in the same category?
Right. This is a good question. So there was a debate that I became familiar with back in the 90s where you would find, not necessarily even a debate, let's say different positions on it, right? So you would always find like Nana Yosef Ben Yakinen would say Black man of the Nile and his family, right? He's saying Black. You have Nana John Henrik Clarke, who's talking about the African world revolution. He's always saying you have to link yourself to a landmass, right? And, sometimes we would make the point that there's no, landmass called Black land. The only reason why this is a debate, or the only reason why this is problematic, is because we're speaking a cracker language. So I'll come to answer your question directly. But what I'm advocating for is we shouldn't speak a cracker language, at least on this point. If we're speaking all the rest English, but if we can say Abi before, anytime we're referring to ourselves, if we can say Kemet to you when we're referring to ourselves, if we can say Adulawa when we're referring to ourselves, if we can say Bandombe, I'm fine with all of those. All of those are the gold standard because, one, all of them link us to the landmass, and all of them tell us that that we are Black people. So it's saying the landmass is the land of Black people and that we're Black people, and that wins on a couple of fronts. One is that it uses our own languages. Two, it delineates who we are, and it cuts off our eternal enemies from our constituency, and African doesn't do that. And then, three, it also lets us know who we are. It lets us know whose we are. So basically it wins on multiple fronts. What I used to do, and this is, even up to like a year or two ago, I would always write African and then write it with a K. I'll use an equal sign and then I'd put Black. So it's clear that when I say African, I mean Black. When I say Black, I mean African. And the reason I was doing that is that, especially living on the continent, like those who live in the United States, they don't have this problem so much. But when you're on the continent, when people say African, oftentimes they're not talking about, us, meaning those of us who are born and raised in the diaspora. When Morocco is in the World Cup, they're saying, yeah, we need to fight for the Africans. Yeah, we need to go root for the Africans. Right. When Egypt is in the World Cup, they're saying, yeah, Africans. And when Black people are running in the Olympics, with the U.S. flag on their back, and, whoever, Ghana is in there or Ethiopia is in there, they're only looking at the Ethiopia. They're not looking at the Black people. But what happens conceptually is that once we go back to our own languages and once we go to our own conceptualization of reality, we realize that this confused, person who's wearing a U.S. flag, or even the confused one who's wearing the Ethiopian flag, that all of those flags would go away. And the only flag would be the red, black, and green flag. And all of that would be Kemet. Haiti would also be Kemet, right?
what we call Ghana now, all these Berlin Conference neo-colonial cages, all of those would be Kemet. And, West Papua New Guinea would also be Kemet. Mekamui, what they call Bougainville, all of that would be Kemet, and we would understand all of us. So again, if I'm speaking English or when I'm using English, previously I would use African equals black, just to say I'm referring to the landmass, I'm referring to the people. I'm trying to find a way for this language that's not our own to do that. But what I started doing is that in my writings, I'm just using Kemetiu, and then I'll put black people in parentheses.
Oh, okay. Cause I was getting ready. I was just about to say, Obenfo, for those of us who don't know the language, who don't, so you learn it. African. Yeah, absolutely. I think that all of us should learn it. But but the reality,
or even if they don't learn it, they should use that term.
Yeah.
But the like right now, just
the reality.
Just
hold on. Let me get thought.
Okay, go ahead.
But the reality is this. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I'm just saying the reality is you have some of us who are not going to take the time to understand or to learn the language. So that's why I asked you. I said, well, in the English language, what would you do? You said Africa with the K, and then you would put equal black, or equal black. I even know some brothers and sisters who say black Africans. They'll say black Africans, so that again we're making you're making
and that's the reason why I put African equals black, because I don't want to say black African because black is an adjective. You'll think I'm referring to black African as though there's any other type of African. You understand? So if I say black African, it's like, oh well, what about the white Africans? What about the East Indian?
Right.
So like that's the problem with that. So that's why I even switched the order, so that when I'm saying it verbally, it doesn't come across like I'm describing a particular type of African out of many Africans. So again, what I used to do was African equals black, but just to the point, the same way that we can introduce Ma'afa, which is an Arabic word, right? And we can run, like I know a lot of people who use Ma'afa who don't speak anything. And most people use our languages like kente cloth on the 3-piece suit. They don't speak anything but like 1, 2, 3 words. But they're going to wear them words out for all their worth. They're not going to learn the whole language. They're going to use 1 word, 2 words, and then they're going to, go with it. So even if we're going to use Ma'afa, and a lot of people are using it, by the same token, it's less. Mama Marimba uses it.
She coined it and she used it, and so a lot of people use it.
Well, she actually didn't coin it. She actually didn't coin it. So the word was pre-existing in Kiswahili.
So she popularized it. She made it popular.
Exactly.
She made it popular in the African Center community.
Exactly.
She did.
Exactly. I would definitely say that. And it's through Let the Circle Be Unbroken.
Exactly.
So, that's the difference. So like, for example, Abibi Mine, that was already a word. So if I make it popular, Abibi Mine, that's a word before I even knew that there was a language called Chi in the entire world.
Right. I understand.
But then to coin it is like, to coin a word is like, okay, well, let me look at how that word is constructed and let me come up with another word. But just to the point that if we can use a word that to me is comparatively less important, like how if we're saying identity is important, the most important thing that we could call ourselves is what we identify as, because again, in our languages, our names define us, they direct us, they give us direction, they do quite a lot. And we start acting like the names that we have. So look at how we've been acting since we've used the term Africa to describe ourselves. Because again, Ukiridi Jina Ridi Mambo Yake, he who inherits a name must also adopt its affairs. So Provincia Africa Proconsularis, it starts off as a province of Rome, right? This is the conquered territory of Rome. And in many ways, since we've been using that term, we act very much like Roman provincialists. I remember when the Notre Dame Cathedral burned down, you had all these quote unquote traditional rulers who are sending money to go and rebuild it. Well, that's a good, Roman provincial. That's what you're supposed to do if you have a name that tells you, one, it's not from your language, 2, you don't understand it. And even on the continent, a lot of people go to college before they even start to conceive of themselves under the term Africa or African or anything else. Before that, they're in these fragment identities of, oh, well, I'm Akan, I'm Yoruba. And even inside of Akan, people don't know that, like Akans, a lot of Akans don't get along. Fantes don't really get along with Asantes like that, generally speaking, right? Achim, done had beef with Kwamu in the past. Like all of these types of things going on. Even, in the NPP, which is supposed to be the Akan party, it's like, well, are you talking about the Asante Akans or the Achim Akans? But, so people can get down to those teeny weeny, fragments. But again, if we're going to make the point that our identity is the most important thing, then the same way that we can popularize Ma'afa, Arabic term, we can popularize any term that lets us know who we are, what our
Mhm.
land is, and who shouldn't be on our land. The reason why I'm bringing up this text from the prophecy of Nefertiti is that it's from the name that tells you, and let me close out with this point. It says, they shall beg water as beggars to allow their cattle to drink. Then Ma'at will return to her seat while Isfet is driven away. Now, a lot of people think about Ma'at as, oh, hold hands with, your enemies, sing
It's
kumbaya.
not. It's
And
not.
it's not. And this text is the primary text to tell you, fall to the sword, fall to the flame, and then Ma'at will return to her seat, right? After the sword and flame action goes on, that's when Ma'at can return to her seat. Otherwise, she can't be, at rest while Isfet is driven away. So, again, the main point is that because our name is our constitution, because Kemet means land of black people, that's the reason why in this text we're talking about keeping the foreigners out of the land of black people. You understand? And again, there's a book I'm working on called the Construction of Black Civilization, and that's a riff off Nana Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, is that it goes into all of these texts that not only it's like in 1974, the point was made that, yeah, Kemet is referring to black people, so forth and so on. So like, that's not even the argument. What we're dealing with now is what are the primary texts that talk about what we did on the basis of being black, right? And again, this is another text, Sanhat. I made the road walking north. I reached the walls of the ruler created to repel Eurasians and crush sand-faring Bedouins. So again, they're talking about walls to repel them and to crush them, right? And again, until we have an identity along these lines that tell us that, this is the land of black people. But then also, once we started to, what's significant about Kemet isn't only the clarity, it's also the confusion that you find later on in Kemet. And that's, again, the point that's made by Nana Chancellor Williams, is that you have a point in time after the Hyksos, the Hakau Hasut, were driven out of the land of black people, that we tried to implement a policy that we used to implement internally, which is the princes of any province that you conquer, you have them come to your court. And the idea is that when you raise them up, once you put them on, they basically become a puppet for you, right? So we started to allow, by and large, and this is in the time of Jehuti Mes Min Kapara, that you started to have an uptick in allowing these princes to come in, marrying Hittite princesses. So all of these, early texts that are talking about keeping them out, building walls, driving them out, so forth and so on. Now you start to have, marry them in, right? Now you start. So again, it's not, oh, well, Kemet was great because they were so clear. We have early on in Kemet the clarity, but then after the expulsion of the Hyksos, this is where you start. And, you would even have.
And then the invasions. I'm thinking about the invasions. Go ahead, the other invasions after the Hyksos and
exactly, the Persians, the
the
Assyrians,
Persians, everybody, the Greeks, the
Romans,
Romans, the Arabs,
exactly,
yeah, everybody. So let me. So Obenfo, look, I just want to get this in. Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler, he said, I would say, he's talking about Nana Marimba, and he said, I would say she framed or coined the usage of the word ma'afa pertaining to our experience. I can agree with that.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair. Instead of saying that she coined
because it was never used before that until she decided, let's use it in that way. Let me put it out there. Let me popularize.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Should be result number 3 says Black identity or African identity, the most updated position on our geo-cultural identity and the parameters of the Black world by Obadele Kambon. Trigger has put up quite a few comments during that presentation, some of them directed to Kofi. I'll let Kofi address that either when he speaks or in the chat itself. Let me start with Black Seal on this one. I haven't heard from Black Seal in a minute. Black Seal, what are your thoughts on what you just saw in this discussion between Dr. Ma'at and Kambon?
So, I mean, when he says black and then equals African, I don't disagree with that. So to me, I think that's an accurate term. I don't know about all the going back and learning the languages. I think that's something that, although I think is a good thing, I think that many people are not prepared to do that. But just black equals African. I think that sums things up nice, neat, tied in a bow, because then that excludes the Arabs, that excludes the fucking Boers and the Afrikaners, getting them out. There's no confusion about when you say black equals African, African equals black. right? I think that's something that just sums it up nice and neat, and it eliminates those people who may be in Africa, but they're not, native to the continent. They don't have that cultural. They came as invaders. Because you came as an invader and settled down, um, that don't make you African. There's a gentleman who's from South Africa named Driscus. He's a UFC champion, and another brainwashed black man, Israel Adesanya, said he was an African champion. He was from South Africa. A white man from South Africa is an African champion. I don't agree with that. These white people have never identified this as African. They've always identified this as European. So I think just saying black equals African is a good way to clear up any confusion. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Before you go, Black Steel, just point out, Trigger Happy is pointing this out from the video too, is that Kambon is really saying to abandon the term Africa. He said he used to use the term, and I use that terminology because of him. But he used to use the term "black equals African" in his writings and whatnot. But he's saying that Africa, that term African is not our creation, and it doesn't really speak to the land as much as we would like it to. So he's saying to use Kemet, or what Trigger Happy calls the synonym of Kemet, which is a BB man, to say African. Cheryl says the same thing in the chat. A BB man equals Africa, and a BB foo equals black people, etc. Right? So that's really what he's saying. He's saying get away from the African.
What language is that, by the way? What language is that?
Is what
a BB man? Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm not certain. So Trigger Happy says a synonym for Kemet. I'm trying to figure out, is it a West African synonym for, is it Ghanaian or Twi or something synonym for Kemet? So I'm not sure exactly what language it is, but if I had to guess, it's a West African language.
Okay.
Yeah. Trigger Happy says a BB man is Twi, Kemetiu is Metrum Menkemi. And he says a BB man just means black nation. So yeah, so it's a Twi language, a West African language, synonym for Kemet. And a Kemet, as we know, and as they discuss, means the land of the blacks, right? So he's saying we should get back to those words. And he made a point because he kind of addressed something you said too, Black Steel, which is we always speak a word or two of some other language. So even if you don't fully return and embrace and learn an indigenous African language like Twi or something like that, he's saying that you could adopt the one or two words, from the language, in particular this one, which would be a BB man, to say that you're an African. You ain't got to make it so difficult that you have to go learn a whole language, is what he's saying. So I just want to point that out too before you exit the stage. Do you have anything to say to that?
No, I think you, like you said, you use parts of language. Heck, we speak in English. English has parts of Latin, and so what he says is, that's certainly okay.
Right. Trigger Happy says, also Black Steel, it debunks the idea that we didn't call ourselves black. We saw blackness as divine. Funny enough, Fijians also have a word for blackness in their languages. So that's another part of that discussion. Kofi has been having discussions strictly on genetics. He hasn't been addressing the ideology and stuff like that. But another part of that conversation is the language. And it says something for a black population, no matter how removed from the continent. It says something for them to have a word or terminology in their language that discusses their blackness, that represents their blackness. It says a lot for us that even though it's a social construct, and we'll point to white folks who created the social construct, the reality is long before that, we had terminologies where we recognized ourselves as black. So I think that's an important thing too. I just mentioned Kofi. Let me go to Kofi next. Kofi, what say you to this topic?
Yeah, what you just said. I mean, French people have a word for black that makes them black. Chinese people have a word for black that makes them black. If you're going to talk about do these people have the word for black linguistically that they describe themselves, and like I said before the last time, like the name Malaysia means Malaysia, and all these names that were named not by the indigenous people, they were named by Europeans, and they denote them as black. So they're going to use that. In the Philippines, they speak Spanish, right? They speak Spanish, right? So their word for black, if they're not speaking their indigenous language, right? They're gonna use the they have a word for black, what is this Negro, negra. They have that. So just saying, doing this false parallel of, well, they look black and they got a word named black. Everybody that has a language has a name for the word black. So anyway, miss me with that. Before I go to the topic at hand, I forgot to also mention that in the last video he said, well, hey, look, all these people still maintain their Africoid features. Features, I'm pretty sure he means skin complexion. Again, like I said before, everyone that's on the sun, that's by or near the sun belt, if you look at the equator, where the equator is and where the equator runs through, most of these people, most of these nations are by the equator. So nature does not make it like, okay, these people are going to lose their complexion. They need their complexion because they're in the sun. Now, when we talk about phenotype, right? As far we know a particular phenotype, like the bone structure and other distinguishing characteristics that we will say someone that's Asian, they have it. We don't have that. A West African doesn't have a Asiatic type, and African doesn't have an Asiatic type. That's why they're grouped off as Negroid, Caucasoid, Mongoloid. And there's a reason for that. And I'm not going to get to points that because they was using like cranial sizes, which is a part of it, just eugenics. So they can't, but he mentioned, oh, look at the cranial sizes. You can't use cranial sizes. That's a eugenic thing. So anyway, but when it comes to this, I think there was like a Shoot the Breeze topic you talked about a long time ago, as far as like, should black people have their own particular language? And I like the analogy that he gave. You have people from in the Olympics, and you have someone that's running for France, and someone's running for Ethiopia, and someone's running for, because they're nations, but those nations could be, riding for other people. So if you have someone that's running for France, and there's a lot of people in a lot of Africans in France, and they got a runner, and the guy's from Senegal, right? They're, oh, go the French guy, even though he's black. Oh yeah, go France, right? But I do agree with what he's saying about we need like a language that's just synonymously an African language, or African languages that we use synonymously. You can use Swahili, but so like you said, Swahili it adopted a lot of African words like English. It's like English is a mutt language. It has a whole bunch of different words, letters from other different languages. But I do agree with that. And when I was listening to this, two things came to mind what Dr. Clark said. Dr. Clark says, black tells you what you look like. It doesn't tell you who you are. And that goes for the last prompt and this prompt. Black tells you what you look like. It doesn't tell you who you are. And another lecture that he did in this day and age, which goes to this prompt right here, he also says we have to sound redundant now, because no one says wet rain. By you saying wet rain, you're like, what other type of rain is there? I'm paraphrasing what Dr. Clark said. But in this day and age, you have your Elon Musk, you got your Charlize Theron, and you have all these white South Africans. So now we have to differentiate of when we say black. You have to say black. So I use black African. So there's no way you can distinguish, who's not. This is a continental black African, right? And I'll use those three words, a continental black African, because according to some people in the chat, it's someone from Malaysia. Fine, they're black too, and they're living in Africa. Let's say they get citizenship in Africa, or an East Indian man that's considered black, even though if they go with the South Africa, they all know he's East Indian. No one's calling him black. They call him a colored or a brown man. But for the sake of what they're saying, someone from Papua New Guinea wants leadership, that takes nationality in Africa, right? I would not call them a continental African. I would just call them a black African. You know what I'm saying? A black African. we need to get our terminologies right and wrong, because again, black people is a spectrum. We're not a monolith. We come in different shades. We come from different walks of life and different places all around the planet. So when I talk about an African, I'll say a continental African. When I'm from Guyana, and some people will say, when I say, "Hey, I'm from Guyana," they'll hear Ghana. So they're like, "Oh, I thought you were from Ghana." I said, "No, I said Guyana." They go, "Oh," or sometimes I would say, "Well," they say, "Are you from Africa?" I say, "Well, not directly. My closest ancestors were there. I wouldn't even call myself a continental African because I'm not directly from continent. I'm been displaced there for, let's say, one, two, three, 4 or 5 generations. But my roots are directly connected to Africa. That's the difference between me, right, and someone from a black person that's from Malaysia. So those are my direct descendants. When I take my DNA, it goes directly there. I don't have to go through a bunch of hoops and I was this and then I was that and then was that and then I became African. No, I'm directly African. I did my DNA test. I'm 98% African. I'm 1% Native American and 1% Irish. All those other groups, Congolese, Cameroon, Mali, Ghana. I have a bunch of African admixture. And I'll just land there. I don't think those other people have those particular same African admixture. I got no Mongoloid blood in me, but I'll land my plane right there.
I appreciate that, Kofi. Good explanation there. Um, you should check out the chat. Trigger Happy has some comments and questions for you. But Cheryl here says the purpose of us calling ourselves by an African language is largely political. It's part of the process of dropping the European mindset and uniting under one banner. Trigger Happy 262 Plus says John Henry Clark said that, but also said we must look at our cultural continuity. Us saying we were black is a cultural continuity of ours. That isn't a debate. He goes on to say, well, actually, Cheryl goes on to say, if you express what you are in a native African language, it tells us what and who we are. That's the point. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Cheryl is saying we should dig deep and actually learn the languages, not the out that Kambon gives us, where he says same way you could learn one or two words in these other languages and use them regularly. You could learn one or two words in an African language and use that regularly instead. So thanks for that, Cheryl. Lastly, Black Trigger Happy 262 Plus says Black African is worse than African. LMAO. Is there a white African? Is there a brown African? If you are using African, you have to use black. There's a few more comments, but I'll leave those to put up on the screen. In the meantime, let me hear from Buana. Buana, you heard everything else from everyone else. What do you got to say?
Yeah, so for me personally, I understand that language is important. Language, if when you learn different languages, you understand the thinking of a people. So language is important, and I would never dismiss language. But I think that Dr. Gabon is talking from the perspective as a linguist. So he sees everything in terms of language, in terms of solving problems. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you could call yourself whatever you got to call yourself, but it's how effective is you calling yourself in terms of executing what you do on a daily basis or in life itself. For example, Ibrahim Traore, when he speaks to people in the world right now, he speaks to them in French, a colonial language. And Ibrahim Traore has done more in speaking French or speaking to the people to France, in particular the French president, in speaking French more than he's ever done in his own native language. So what does it matter? The effect is what you do with the language. The effect is what you do with it. Elon Musk. Elon Musk probably knows both Afrikaans, that Dutch language, but he could also probably speak in an African language. Probably by the African woman who raised him, because his mother and daddy raised him. So the African woman who's raised, he probably could speak in that language as well. What does it matter? He would be able to subject uh, African people in South Africa to his white supremacy just as good as any other white supremacist using African language. So what does it matter? What matters to me is how effective is this usage of this language going to be in terms of you getting control of your natural resources, being effective in terms of distributing these natural resources to the people. How effective is the usage of this language going to be? Black people have to learn how to crawl before they learn how to walk. Now, all these other things and declaring the world, okay, we're going to declare ourselves committed to you and all that stuff. That is all well and good, but the reality is, you know, people, we are in a competition mode. You know, so the Burkina Bay say, I'm from Burkina Faso, and the Nigerians say, I'm from Nigeria. The reality is, we have the French coming in our country, we have to remove them. So whether we do it in our own native languages or whether we do it in French, we must get them out of the country. So we have to act in kind. This is for me what's going to be most effective. And the world sees this. The people in Haiti, the funny thing is, the people in Haiti who speak Creole, but they also speak French, they listen to what Ibrahim Traore is saying in French to the French president and are inspired by that. The people from Martinique, the people from other parts of the so-called colonial French world, they're inspired to act and move off of that. So I think that to get into these the minutia of linguistics at this point, I think that people need to learn how to crawl before they actually can walk. For the best thing, sure, all of us can learn African languages and all the good stuff. But what matters is how effective is it on the ground? How is it going to work on the ground? Am I going to be able to get people to move in speaking to them in a language that's foreign to them, or using a old colonial language? Yeah, I have to use the tools that I have at hand. I am in the Western world. It behooves me to understand English. It also, and I would love to learn African language, and I can take that task up. But it's behooved me to also learn Creole, French, and Spanish. These are the countries that's closest to me. So I'll be able to converse with people who look just like me, just out of the borders of my own country. It's good to creep before you could actually walk. And though Dr. Kambon is flying right now in understanding probably several different African languages, most African people are not there yet. And it's aspirational to aspire to get there. But I think that initially, right now, we have to use the tools that are at hand to be most effective in the societies and where we come from. And until then, I just think that this is just icing on the cake. But we need to get to the cake before we get to the icing. Yeah? But that's just me. That's just my opinion. I'll leave it there.
So, but I appreciate that you say that that's just your that's just your opinion, and I appreciate several things you said just now. But anytime I hear that, and the longer I live, and the more I hear it, it starts sounding a certain way to me. It starts sounding like we're not trying to really be African. It sounds like we're not trying to do the work to immerse ourselves and to, if you will, re-Africanize ourselves. Sounds like we just want to go along with the setup, with the way it's designed, and we do it, and at the end of the day, we'll say we are African, but it's almost like we don't really mean it in a sense. And I just want to be careful for the listeners, especially young people who might be listening, that what you really want to do is immerse yourself in the long term. Now, what Buana is saying might be true in the short term. I'm not too certain about that. I think it's a powerful thing to speak your own language or to speak another language. And for us, one that's more centered to who we are as Black people, right? But if we give the impression that forget about that shit, forget about that, let's just do what you're supposed to do in the current system and try to get ahead, and then maybe somehow we'll get back to the thing that we need to do first, which you have to be yourself first. You know what I mean? The European is himself first. And then when he wants to come around different groups, what does he do? He goes and immerses himself in what they do. That's why you got white guys who are more yo than a 10th generation black American. They know who they are. They're strong in who they are. Yeah, 1 second. They know who they are. They're strong in who they are. And they operate within themselves. They only start to emulate others when in fact they're really being themselves, which is they're trying to swindle you, right? But we got to be ourselves. Buana, go ahead.
Sure. So I want to be very clear. The last conversation we had with a brother on the panel, he believed that he believed that the black man had an inability to think for himself. Only through the actions of white men coming in and informing him about the world around him that the world could exist. And when I tried to explain to him in English language how the black man could think for himself, the black man could be logical, all these things, he didn't even believe me. This is almost like on an elementary level, where many of our brothers believe that Europeans are the bringers of light in the world, right? And for me personally, to think that this world has been around for thousands of years, and black men have been on this planet for thousands of years, I must first convince him that what Marcus Garvey say, one of the most difficult things in his process of the UNIA was selling the Negro to himself. This is one of the most difficult processes. So I have to do that first on a foundational level before I even could get to where this brother talking about and learning different African languages. This is where our people are right now. And if I skip that step and try to just teach him the African languages and have him wearing the clothes and stuff like that and walking in a parade, we go, you know what gonna happen? That we gonna be presentationally, we gonna look the part, but substantially we gonna be empty. So what gonna happen is the people gonna revert back to what they used to, because they're gonna be filled with nothingness. They're gonna have the presentation of all the accoutrement, speak to all the African languages, wearing all the African garb, but substantially they're gonna be void, vacuous. So I have to sell the Negro to himself first and foremost. And if I wouldn't have believed that until I start getting in some conversations with older men. We had these discussions on this panel. Anyone, if they disbelieve me, could listen to the playbacks to our conversations to see where our people actually are. So this is my job, this is that. And if it comes off for the people in the room to say, well, I'm just trying to stay within the status quo, y'all are maybe ahead of the class or ahead of the curve, and I am trying to meet the people where they are. I can be ahead of the curve too, but I know the large majority of the people where they are and having conversations with them. And I'm gonna tell you, brother, substantially, I have to sell the Negro to himself, because these people believe that Europeans are the bringers of light. That's a base level understanding of the world. And if I can't sell you off for the terms of gravity, oh Lord, if I have to convince you that maybe some other people may have had a view that what comes up must go down before certain people write it in a book, then this is where our people are. This is where I have to start. Now, this for the smart kids in the room, they can say, man, that's too slow for me. That message ain't for you. But I have to start where the slow kids in the room, because I used to be a slow kid. So that's how I see it. And if it come off like I'm trying to accept the stuff, no, it ain't that, brother. There's a method to my madness. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to get across is the messaging. I get where you're coming from, but I just want the people who are listening not to be fooled into thinking that what Buana is saying is necessarily don't indulge, don't immerse yourself in being African. Ultimately, we need to really reconnect with that. At what pace? That's a different story, of course, is going to be varied across a large number of people. But the idea is we supposed to want to get to that. You know what I mean? In the chat, Afro Native World says true. He says it's a Buana. That's covered in Gavi and Gaviism too, selling the Negro to himself. Trigger Happy 262 Plus says Buana respectfully. This is super irrelevant to what Kambon is saying. Should this be our identity or not? Should we call ourselves Kemet? It's just a proposal, a proposition. Lastly, Cheryl says to Buana, we already substantially empty, brother. Ain't nowhere to go but up. And she says, lastly, stop worrying about everyone. Worry about the ones who want to make those changes. There's always going to be people who resist it. Focus. So those are some comments from the chat. I'll throw it to the panel if there's any last thoughts on this prompt. Let me know.
Yeah, yeah. I see what Buana is saying. Sometimes, saying we have to have look. My wife is an educator. We all been in school. You could be in fifth grade, but there's different levels of fifth grade. You got people in the advanced classes, people in the middle, and you got people that that need to catch up. But I do feel that it's very advantageous. Now, me as a person coming from a English colony that only speaks one language, which is English, we all are been in a space where you have people that are dual lingual, they're multilingual, and they could switch like that. If they don't want to know what you're talking about in a heartbeat, they can just switch. So it's very, very advantageous to learn more than one language. I feel jealous. My wife, she's Panamanian Jamaican, right? She could just start. She understands Spanish in a heartbeat. And me as someone that's not linguistic at all, I wish I had my own language to talk to talk, so they to convey a message, And when we're in the world right now, and everyone is speaking English. English is one of the most common speaking languages. So if you're yourself and about in the world, and you're in Japan or somewhere else where people they speak English is just they speak English for business. There's no reason for them to speak English. They're speaking English because it's for business. So we should do the same. But in a heartbeat, they can just start speaking Japanese, and you're and you there looking like a fool. You know what I'm saying? You stand there look like you pissing in the wind. Like, it's like, okay, I guess I'm out of this conversation. I wish we had that power where we had a language that we could just start speaking and just ostracize people out of the conversation. Me as a person that only speaks one language, I envy that. So I think there is a lot of power to being multilingual. Well, that's pretty much it.
Appreciate that, Kofi. Couple of comments I want to read from the chat. I agree with this one. Trigger says, imagine if Israel said, we shouldn't propose a revival of Hebrew because people don't understand it at the moment. Revolution requires vision and a look to the future. Israel could be speaking Yiddish. That's a good point. Afro Native World says, based off what Koku is saying, it seems more problematic for the diaspora in this Western hemisphere to want to be African. What is the likelihood of it increasing? Repatriation, I guess, to Africa. African World says a Beaver Man seems like the best way to do that, I guess, to refer to ourselves. And Cheryl agreed with Trigger Happy when he talked about Israel adopting Hebrew. She says exactly. We sound crazy. Yeah, I think we do have to push the needle a bit more. Just waiting for Black folks to reach a level of consciousness. This game that we're playing, like we said a few weeks ago, I think it was Anthony McPhail who said if we have to wait 500 years to have a revolution to change these circumstances, then that's just like saying it'll never happen. And I took that to heart when he said it then, because I believe that as well. But I also apply it here. how long are we going to sit around waiting, right? Now, Cheryl said, don't wait for nobody, just work with the people who was ready and so forth. But I don't know if that gives us, and while I agree with that too, it's a good idea, it's a good move. I don't know if that gives us the threshold of people we would need to really change this thing. And that's the problem, because right now the problem is the threshold of conscious people within the black community is small. Because we hang around each other here on Shoot the Breeze and all the other shows on KWAZ radio, we think there's more people in the conscious community than there is now. If you really peep it, it's the same people over and over. And that's our problem. We don't have a groundswell of enough people who are African centered, who are African thinking, forward thinking, as far as Africa goes, for us to change anything. So I said a lot just now, but if anyone wants to comment to any of that, you can do so now. If
Um,
not, we'll go to
I,
should be something before. Go ahead, Kofi.
no, real quick. I like what Trigger Happy said. He's like, imagine the Jewish people, the quote unquote Hebrew people, say, you know what, we're not going to use Hebrew anymore. And that's one thing I admire about the Jewish people. Their natural tongue is Yiddish. So they'll incorporate Yiddish and Hebrew together and make it their own. And make it their own. That's how they sell it to themselves. And that's how they sell it to the generations coming. And that's how they sell it to the world. So that you cannot question their Jewishness. Here in New York, they're dressing like they still dress like it's 1945. The Hasidic Jews. They still dress like it's 1945. We laugh at them, but at the same time, we have respect for them. Because no matter how nonsensical, no matter if they're cosplaying or hijacking other people's culture or linguistically, or they to them it's always 1945, they have power. And they have a group cohesion of saying, like, you know what? Lie or not lie, this is our truth. So we're gonna live our truth, implement our truth. To the point because I just live in Crown Heights, they got their own police. They got their own police. They police. Now, if anyone want to know Crown Heights, Crown Heights is where the Hasidic Jews and there's black people that live that also live within that area. But they got like a couple like blocks and blocks where it's just their business, right? But they're sprinkled all over, but they're concentrated in kind of like in the middle of crimes, but they're spread all over. They police their own neighborhood. When they're having events, the police is just there to back them up, but they run their own security. That's power. Well, now I end it right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
there are also to add to what Kofi is saying just a little bit. They they are there are also Jews who work on Wall Street who don't speak a lick of Yiddish, but they also know as Zionists that many of their monies and powers, as much as money as they're gonna make, to donate some of that to Israel. So their ideology is based around absolutely Israel and Zionism. So even if they don't speak the language, the money is the ideology gives them the obligation to send at least partially some of the monies that they earn on Wall Street to the state of Israel. So it doesn't matter if, well, I understand, like I say, language is important, but if I am dedicated to Pan Africanism, that means if I work on Wall Street, some of my monies should be going to Burkina Faso. Some of my money, because the president there promotes Pan Africanism. If just as if some of the brothers over here, and even if we don't speak the same, I don't speak an African language, but in terms of ideology, we are one. We are one. Abraham Traore in Burkina Faso and me in the West, we are one with each other in terms of what we want to do. So my money should go towards that state. So, like I say, language is important, but ideology for me is more a little bit more important. But I'll leave it just to be brief.
thank you for that, Buana. In the chat, Trigger Happy 262 Plus says, but I want to build a future where my kids can only speak Swahili and Twi and not have to learn another European language because of the custodianship of Europe to the world. Cheryl says it's going to take an invasion of America for a fire to be lit under black people, but that might be sooner than later. Trigger says, yeah, they are cultural, incongruent on a linguistic level, but still connected to their homeland. They would probably be called a inside-out Jew, but since they make money, they are good. So that's Trigger's response to what Buana had just said. I think this is the last one from Trigger. He said, also, that doesn't erase the fact that Hebrew is a revived language that the person at Wall Street can learn. It could have been the case they didn't have that at all. And that's what I thought when Buana was saying it. Buana was making a good point, but at the same time, they actually, as a people, went about reviving a dead language, and they didn't take a gang of generations to do it. Once they set out to do it, they did it. Like, they didn't take a gang of lifetimes to get it done. And that's all I'm saying personally. When it comes to this conversation, I think everyone made valid points, and I think some points are really strong. But ultimately, what I'm saying is, I'm speaking to the speed or the quickness or the reaction time of black folks. I think we've been kind of trudging along a little too slowly with this. I understand we've had setbacks and we have people actively trying to destroy our forward movement. Regardless, though, the better we would be organized, the better we'll be able to outpace those interruptions. Those interruptions, and I think that's the point we got to really start talking about more too. I think we got to stop talking along the lines of it'll take time, it'll take time. We know it'll take some time, but what are we doing to cut down that time? Like Amilcar Cabral said, I think about his quote probably every day. Like, people are not here to really argue about ideologies. Is it capitalism? Is it socialism? Is it like people don't really care ultimately? You know what people care about? People care about prosperity, seeing their children and children's children prosper and themselves too. And right now, we're not necessarily prospering the way we probably should be, because we're stuck on this thing of it'll take time, it'll take time, it'll take time. I'm not saying we could turn this around in a day or two, but I'm saying that we could cut. I'm saying by this time we should be a little bit better on this unity, togetherness, cohesiveness thing. Is what I'm saying. I think someone wanted to add something. Go ahead.
No, I just want to give a perspective when we're talking about the Europeans that call themselves Jews or Hebrews. You gotta understand, no matter where they are in the European world, they are a minority. So most of them are from Poland, Russia, all these places. They are the minority, because most of Europe, if they have any type of religious sect, it's always Christianity. So from all those places that they are in Europe, they are the extreme minority, right? So you don't take, so you don't need all Russia. Didn't need all of Russia to adopt the Hebrew faith and all this other stuff. It was always a small amount of people, no matter where they go. They went to Poland, same thing. A small amount of people, did that. So, like Marcus Garvey says, the ones that are no good here, they're no good here. You just gotta leave them alone. You just gotta do our own thing.
Absolutely, Kofi. I appreciate that. If there's no last thoughts, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 4. Also for time's sake too, I guess. Shoot the Breeze. Shoot the Breeze topic number 4 says, why does this black woman think that good dudes need to accept their bad decisions? So we have a little bit of a palate cleanser with this one. We're not talking about blackness or Africanity so much, although that's always the conversation, but not so much in this one. This one takes us to X. Let me make sure it shares with you guys. So in X, this video is short. It's just over a minute. We'll watch it maybe twice, and then we'll discuss it.
She was like, no, I don't want you. And then once she became a baby mama, he was a CEO, executive, and all that. And she like, hey, you remember me? He said, no, I don't want you. I be feeling like, respectfully, y'all is the grown-up versions of the niggas that got hurt in high school while we was out fucking the drug dealers. Let me tell you something. We were victims then making horrible decisions with grown-ass on us. Y'all gotta let that shit go.
So let me break it down for the people that aren't idiots like this person. This guy has no money. He's building. He wants this girl. She doesn't like him, as you can see there. She, in turn, goes for the guy. You see him with the car and shooting the gun for the drug dealer or the guy right there, right? So she's happy. She doesn't want this guy right here. So in turn, what happens is eventually, due dysfunction, this guy ends up being in jail because he's doing crimes and all types of hot shit. But in the meantime, she's had a bunch of his nappy-headed kids, and then in turn she tries to spin the block back on this guy. By that time he's successful and he doesn't want her ass. So basically, simply put, women want men to settle for less than they deserve when a woman in her prime would never do such a thing. And most men say fuck no to that. That's your lesson.
To the girl in high school, she was like, no, I don't want you. And then once she became a baby mama, he was a CEO, executive, and all that. And she like, hey, you remember me? He said, no, I don't want you. I be feeling like, respectfully, y'all is the grown-up versions of the niggas that got hurt in high school while we was out fucking the drug dealers. Let me tell you something. We were victims then making horrible decisions with grown-ass on us. Y'all gotta let that shit go.
So let me break it down for the people that aren't idiots like this person. This guy has no money. He's building. He wants this girl. She doesn't like him, as you can see there. She, in turn, goes for the guy. You see him with the car and shooting the gun for the drug dealer or the guy right there, right? So she's happy. She doesn't want this guy right here. So in turn, what happens is eventually, due dysfunction, this guy ends up being in jail because he's doing crimes and all types of hot shit. But in the meantime, she's had a bunch of his nappy-headed kids, and then in turn she tries to spin the block back on this guy. By that time he's successful and he doesn't want her ass. So basically, simply put, women want men to settle for less than they deserve when a woman in her prime would never do such a thing. And most men say fuck no to that. That's your lesson.
Yes, indeed. So this was a tweet by Polo Man. Polo Man adds a comment. He says, nope, y'all wasn't victims. Y'all made poor ass decisions and bad ass choices. Now y'all gotta live with the consequences of them choices. A few people put up the Mace eating popcorn meme. Some others put up, these regular commentary memes. I'm not gonna get into it. Someone says girls choose boyfriends and men choose wives. What a man sees as the prize changes with each passing day. A successful man no longer is the beggar. He is now the chooser. He is the prize to be won. So those are the kind of comments to this post. But let me hear what the comments are from you guys in the chat. And let's hear what you guys on the panel have to say. Cheryl, our sister Cheryl, is in the chat. She says, all I hear is trauma created by white society. Sorry. KW Don 7, always good for a serious chuckle. He says, no reach backs. Cheryl says, what are our decisions and choices influenced by? So I'll throw all those comments as well as the prompt to my panelists. This time, let me start with Buana on this one. Buana, what say you to this?
I think that this shit is hilarious. This is the funniest shit ever. Me personally, I've been lucky for the most part to have the company of good women in my life. But I look at it like this, man. If you can't take a risk and a chance with me, when I'm low, it's no way. Like the brother said, no reach past, man. I mean, much respect to the sisters out here who have their children and are raising their children sometimes alone and by themselves. But I'm like, man, if you couldn't take a risk with me when I was broke, I understand why some of the brothers would be like, fuck that. but blessings to the sisters. I wish the sisters well. I hope that they are able, if not to find a partner, find some happiness within their lives. I think that some of the women gotta understand that not most black women, most people don't get married.
Oh,
First of all,
executive and all that.
and most black women will never be married. So I know marriage is the best kind of example for a relationship, but see if you could try to find happiness wherever you fall in life, even when you make bad decisions. But I understand why most brothers is like, the hell with that. If you couldn't take a chance with me back then, it's no way. It's no way. But respect to them though. I'll leave it there, Koku.
Wait, Wanda, before you go, what's your reasoning for why you think most black women won't be married?
Statistically, most black women won't get married. Statistically, look it up. Look it up. Most black women never be married. And in fact, even in the numbers, there women outnumber men by a large portion of the population. And then when you include incarceration, homosexuality, cheating, different kinds of things to that statistic itself, you would see it. Just even in terms of numbers, most black women, will never be married, and even in the numbers. So I mean, that's a reality, but it doesn't mean you won't find a suitable partner throughout your lifespan or a suitable mate. But the numbers, it don't balance out for the amount of women that exist. It's probably a whole less amount of men, even in America, in the Caribbean, and the Western world. Just look at the numbers itself. They outnumber us, I think, by two to one. So even if you marry all the women, they're gonna be a large portion of the black female population that'll never have a partner because they outnumber us, even in the numbers. So if you factor in all the other things as well, that's just a reality. But I'll leave it.
Oh yeah, no, me personally, I was aware of those factors. I thought you meant it from a um, a personality reason. So that's why I asked for that clarity. Thanks for that though. Let me mix it up a little bit. Let me hear from Kofi next. Kofi, what say you to this?
Yeah, this is so many memes on this like that. I know you guys probably seen this actual memes and comic strips about this where you got the little nerdy guy and he got his books and his backpack is overflowing with books with the big Steve Urkel glasses and he's like, want to go to the prom with me? He's like, oh no, you're a geek, you're a dork, you're a this, you're a that. And see the guy with his pants around his ankles with cell phones and beepers and gold chains and he's selling drugs. I want him. And then, have a bunch of kids with him and stuff like that. And then 10 years later and she said, oh, remember me? And he's like, no. And she's calling him a simp, all these nasty names because he don't want to lower himself. But let's flip it the other way around. Let's say you had a girl that liked a guy. He's part of the basketball team. There's movies about this. He's part of the basketball team. He's the star quarterback. And she's like, I like you. Take me to the prom. He's like, I'm not taking you to a prom. You look all fuddy and homely and you're fugly and all that. And then he sees her like 10 years later and she got a BBL and she's got a bad body. He's like, oh my God, she's a model now. It's like, and the guy she's meeting, he got fatter and he's working at Walmart and he's driving a beat up car. He's like, hey, remember me? And she goes, no, I'm not dealing with you. I'm going with this other guy. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that will happen. I don't think that woman would have that same would be so egregious to that particular scenario that I laid out. But when it comes to like things like that, like I said, I think it's those type of women. Look, we all make mistakes, especially when you're younger. You make mistakes. Hopefully, we learn from those mistakes. But as a woman, one thing women don't understand they need to understand from when they're young women. If you get pregnant, right, sex is more of a responsibility on the woman because a man can walk away from his responsibility, a woman can't. So you have to be extra careful, extra careful, extra vigilant about your chastity. right? And a man, a boy is going to be a boy. He's going to, he's going to want that thing. He's going to want that good stuff, whatever. We know that, right? But it's it's more on the women. I'm not trying to be sexist or whatever. This is just nature. This is just nature. If you make a bad choice and you get pregnant, unfortunately, if you're with a good guy, then okay, no, at least I'm with a good guy. I'm not with a deadbeat. But most women aren't making that decision. That's why they're single mothers. They're not divorced women with children. They're single mothers with children. Now, if I would become single or whatever and stuff like that after 20 something years of marriage and I'm looking for a woman, I'd rather be with a divorced woman with children versus a single woman baby mama. You know why? What that tells me? At least a man took a chance with you to procreate with you and to be with you and start a life with you. He
God
saw
damn,
something in you.
Kofi.
He saw something in you versus a woman that has 3, 4, or 5 kids, never been married, and it's like, whoa, you could be the baddest thing on earth. That don't mean nothing to me. I want because
That
that means you're a headache. If you're the baddest thing on earth with a whole bunch of kids and no man want to put a ring on you. So I mean that's pretty much my perspective on this whole thing. If you flip it and it's a football star and and he wants to he don't want to talk to the fuddy duddy girl, but when she comes back she's a supermodel, she'll feel the same way. So it has nothing to do with men or women. It's like, no, you rejected me when I was at my lowest. Now here I am. I improved myself, and now you want something to do with me? Get out my face. That goes for both sides, but that's pretty much it.
I appreciate that, Kofi. And like Cheryl says, aha, this is where ideology comes in. You can't avoid ideology, and that reminds me something Buana said earlier. I'm going to ask a follow up question after we hear from Black Steel, because again, we are an African centered show, and not just we're not just providing problems, but we want to provide solutions too, and those solutions need to be African centered. So I have a follow up question. But first, let's hear from Black Steel. Black Steel, you heard everything else everyone else had to say, and you see what's going on in the chat. What say you to all of it?
Well, you know what I gotta say, man. That meme with the dude with the beat it chick meme is so funny in this situation. I remember then, I'm going back. Well, I was in high school myself, and me being a teenage boy, a lot of these girls was dating older dudes because these dudes had money, these dudes had cars, these dudes had their own place. Um, so she says we were tricked by these men. I don't like to use it. I understand the appeal, right? If you're a young person, oh, this dude has money, he can buy me stuff in a way that a teenage boy couldn't. And there was one girl in school. She was East Indian. She might have been from Trinidad, right? We used to always mess with her. She was talking about her boyfriend had money, and I said, "Oh, girl," and some of the kids would tease her, "Oh, your girlfriend a pedophile," right? I laugh at it now, but it wasn't funny then. But the girl was really upset. She had tears in her eyes when we threatened to tell one of the administrators that her boyfriend was 40 years old, right? And she was like, "He's not 40, he's 26." I was like, "That's just as bad, right?" But this thing like, oh, we were tricked, we didn't know. A lot of these young girls, and I'm not saying that they were, because they were victims, right? But even so, you're not just talking about teenagers, you're talking about 18, 19-year-old adult women. And they want to come to you after dealing with all this trauma. And then usually when they leave these situations, they're not just leaving these situations with just a child, right? They're dealing with emotional trauma, right? So now you have to deal with all the stuff that guy did to her. And now you got to try to help heal her. And on top of that, she bring another dude's kids. I understand you and the child are a package deal, but I just want the sandwich. I don't want the combo, and I just want to just get in here and do my due. I mean, and she
Oh,
told
that's
me,
a wicked one. That's a wicked
That's
one. Karma and
cold.
combo.
That's
Oh, man, that's
cold.
cool.
I don't want the fries. Just give me the burger.
I don't want you get the burger, but I want the fries. I just want the sandwich, man. I don't want the combo. you know, and these women are frustrated now because you're essentially giving these men a bad deal. It's a bad deal when you look at it because I don't just have to date you. I have an obligation to just date and court you. I got to deal with your kid too. What if this kid is bad as hell? I dated a girl. Her son was terrible, guys. I got this. This little boy was a demon. I wish my son was here. Would tell you this boy come over, start knocking over stuff. He pulling books off the shelf. He having temper tantrums and stuff. And the mama was fine, right? So I figured, okay, yeah, this boy bad, but she
Blacks,
can't.
it was worth it. It was worth it.
Sometimes you gotta make a trade off, man. That thing, man. Listen, it happens sometimes, right? But then ultimately, it's like, is this what I wanted for the rest of my life? I got to chastise this boy and deal with his little temper tantrums. Or I'm here, I'm not your daddy. Like, ma'am, you're not offering these men a good deal. You're saying come back and date us after you done got with emotional baggage, physical baggage in the form of children. You got that baby weight on you, and it's not a diss, but like telling these men who worked hard and strived to achieve something in life, and the best you could offer him is some used box and another man kids. Like, what are we doing right now? Would you would you want that
It's a
deal?
truth. It's an uncomfortable truth. It's a friggin' uncomfortable truth.
It's an uncomfortable truth. But if it was the other way around, right? If I had 10 baby mamas, right, and 12 kids, and this woman done worked her way and did everything she's supposed to do right in this life, and I was to come with her with nothing but hard dick and bubble gum, would she be okay with that?
Hell no.
No,
Hell
she
no.
wouldn't be okay with that. Say, get out of my face is what she said. She would say, get out of my face. All right. So I don't understand what she's frustrated for. You made your bed, man. You gotta lay in that bed. You fluffed the pillows up. You didn't change the sheets. You gotta lay in it. It's do the best you can. There'll be some dude. I'm pretty sure that she's a reasonably attractive woman, right? A lot of dudes ain't gonna care, right? They'll play that stepdaddy role. Let's keep it a bean, all right? There's a lot of dudes who play that stepdaddy role. They don't care. She's good looking. They'll get in there and they'll put little Dontavius on the shoulders at the football game. He won't care, you know. So maybe she should go after somebody who wants to buy what she's selling. But don't try to convince somebody who don't want you to want you, lady. You come across as desperate, and you're not real. And here's the thing: it's like if you get a man who's not really your type, right? He may be that so and so quote unquote square dude, right? But you used to dealing with, a certain type of man, right? Are you really gonna appreciate that, brother? Are you? I'm gonna say this. Some people look down, like some women look down. I remember there was a video where the woman called her husband a simp because he married her and she had 3 kids. In her mind, he was a simp. Now, mind you, he wiped you up, brought all your kids with you. But in her mind, he was less than because if you was a good man, you wouldn't even locked in with me in the first place. That's a what? So who's to say this man steps up and she respects him and she values him and what he and who he is as a person, right? What if she done had all these kids? Now she don't want to have no more kids. Now you done sit up here and you done had the local dope boys kids, but when I want to reproduce my legacy, you don't want to do that no more? Nah, bro. Nah, I don't
Tied
want.
off. She tied off. She
Yeah, she
tied off.
tied off now. So now I don't get my legacy, but I gotta take care of another man's legacy. Kick rocks, lady. Kick rocks. Kick boulders at this point. It's just the audacity. These chicks don't have nothing else. They have the audacity. That's one thing they do have in spades. They don't have the ability to pick no fathers for their kids. They can find some audacity when they need to. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Well done there, Black Sue. Well done. I can't disagree with you, but I do have a follow up. So before I ask a follow up, is there any last thoughts on anything that anyone said in the chat or on the panel? If you have any last thoughts, you can go ahead and do that now.
I,
Any,
I just love Blackstein's comments. It could get ugly. This conversation could get real ugly. But since I know we are very aware and sensitive to the needs of our black sisters, we won't get too ugly in this conversation.
yeah, well said there, Juana. Coincidentally, Sister Cheryl in the chat mentions that she married an intellectual, a needsome. Some might say. I like that. I need some. I've never heard that term. I like that term. I need some. But um, I could tell even before Cheryl said that. Because if you've been paying attention, Cheryl mentioned that her husband, not in the last batch with, or maybe it was the last batch with Dr. Uma and them, but her husband got Ghanaian citizenship. He got it through Obadele Kambon, who we just saw in the last prompt. So I could tell. You see, you could tell your people in a sense. You could tell what they're dealing in or what they're looking to deal in, right? But if you're here having these conversations, man, woman, boy, or girl, you could tell that there's something there, and it's a sure thing when you see it. But my follow up question is, as African centered people who come from the idea of Ubuntu, where I am because you are, so we look out for one another and etc. Um, you know, it, it, how should we deal with this as African centered people? Buana mentioned that we're outnumbered 2 to 1, women to men. So then, if we don't want our women to go unmarried or unloved in any significant way, what have you, what do we do as African centered people going forward when it comes to these types of situations in the video? Anyone can answer, and you guys in the chat, I'll read your comments on the screen. So, does anyone on the panel have any thoughts about that?
No,
Listen, go
okay.
ahead, Juana.
No, I know what Koku's getting at polygamy. I am not marrying no scallywags to bring dramas to my life because in some idea of Ubuntu, if these people come, and say, well, Juana, we need assistance, we need help, aid, and support, and if it's organized in a way that I know where it's going to be effective, absolutely. Let's set up a system or programs in where we could benefit a community of people who may not necessarily have the people that they need. Organizations, brotherhood programs, fatherhood programs. But in terms of inviting into my personal space a second individual who could bring drama and their children who is not mine, the drug dealer kids, as Black Steve was saying, who gonna bring drama into my personal space. Ubuntu is fine, but I must have my personal happiness too, and that mental happiness, physical happiness is important to me as well. Above Ubuntu, above Ubuntu. And that's not me sound selfish or capitalist, but I must have my peace and happiness. Yes, man. Yes, yes. No, no, no scallywags. I am sorry. I am sorry. So if that's anti-African, may I like have to get the certificate today, anti-African certificate. Because like I said, this chick in this video, you think you could tell anything? No way. No, man. I good, man. I good. Go ahead, Black Steel. Go ahead.
No, but before Black Steel goes, let me just address that real quick. Juan, I feel you on what you're saying, and I think you touched on the two solutions really, which is we would have to go back before we could actually engage in polygamy. And I wasn't even primarily thinking about polygamy when I posed the question. I was really thinking about the re-education of who we are. So before we can even engage in the physical act of polygamy, we have to re-educate ourselves. I'm not here, like you said, Buana, and like most people said on the panel and in the chat, I'm not here to save you from your bad choices, right? I'm talking about a situation where before you make those bad choices, you make the choice to cohabitate or be a polygamist or something of that nature. But really, I'm talking about the re-education first and foremost. So thank you for that, Buana. Black, do you want to add something? Go ahead. Black, you're muted if you're
All
talking.
right, I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, so let me say this, right? Arranged marriages. I gotta keep it a buck. Arranged marriages, right? Because young people they're young. Their brains aren't fully developed, right? Sometimes they want what's best for them, right? They don't want what's always best for them, right? You got a little kid, if you let them, let eat candy for dinner, if you let them, but that's not good for them. So I think that many times as parents, we may have to screen and select the people who our children date, right? Um, and that's done out of because we love our children, we want the best for them, right? From a historical standpoint, right, arranged marriages tend to last longer, but that's because in many cases divorce is not an option in many countries where they have arranged marriages. You're not going to go to Pakistan or Saudi Arabia and get divorced that easily unless you're a man. The man can just in Islam he can say I divorced you 3 times and that's it. But the women it's going to be a lot harder situation to get out of marriage like that. But I do think there's benefits to that. But that involves community, right? That involves a connectedness that many people don't have. African people, especially in the West, are too individualistic, right? I do what I want. What I do doesn't affect anybody but me. I choose my path. You choose your path. You don't say nothing to me about it unless I want you to say something about it, right? And because of this individuality, it leads to people making decisions, and they think decisions just affect them. And these decisions affect not just you, but your descendants for generations down the line. Picking a good person to have a child with could really be the difference between life and death. And that's the truth. And that's something people, it's not about just having fun or just getting your rocks off. This is really a matter of dealing with somebody who has the potential to ruin your life. And that's something I've often said to my own children. Like, the person you choose to mate with can have ramifications that can last you for the rest of your life, really. Who wants to be stuck? I mean, what if you have a child that has special needs? Let's say the kid's not just bad; he has special needs, right? This kid may need around the clock care, and you are a single parent who has no help. And I know you love your child, you want the best for him, but you've just put yourself in a bind. And instead of you finding somebody who would love, support, and be there to help you with this raise this child, now you're stuck on your own. Um, So I think that community arranged relationship marriages is definitely the way to go. We got to screen these boys, and we need an ability to shun, to outcast. Hey, look, you know what? This young man right there, yeah, the one who got caught with the vape in school and who didn't graduate 10th grade. I don't think you're a good match for my daughter. I think we need to as a community, we need to shun him. Maybe not. Okay, maybe say that. Maybe not shun him, but maybe give him the tools to bring him up to speed, right? Because I don't think that sometimes these young people be out here with no support. So the community, everybody needs to be involved in the idea of mating, building relationships, building family. It can't just be, well, I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna do what I want to do. And when things go left, you say like, oh, now I need help. But we was trying to help you avoid this fate in the first place, right? And then get mad, people don't want to deal with that. People just when you're bringing children into this situation, right? And I come to the understanding a lot of people they don't want to be parents. They just want to have sex, right? And the kids come as a byproduct of that, and that affects the way they raise their children, right? I see this every day. These kids be just dropped off. Mama don't care. Daddy don't care. It is what it is. So now these young people are just out here aimless. They don't have a north star to aim towards. They're just so focused on just living their life for themselves. So I think that the solution to this problem is creating and building community with each other and the ability to have more parental involvement and screening. Like you should have before you date somebody's daughter. Hey, I want to meet this young man. Me and your mother going to talk to him. We're going to talk to his parents and get involved with that. Because we want you to understand that this is somebody we care about. You're not supposed to come here and smash my child and leave her with a baby and think everything is cool. You can just go and live your life. No, buddy. And same thing for her. You're not going to sit up here and lay up with these dudes and have all these kids and think everything is okay. So that's my thoughts on it. I'll leave it there.
Oh, well said. Well said. In the
Yeah,
chat,
yeah, that was good. That was good. That was good. He hit on what I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I just want to quickly say in the chat, Black's Trigger Happy 262 Plus said, Black Steel is cooking. The West is so individualistic that even eating habits is about the customization of an individual's food palette as opposed to eating with people on a collective diet. He says, also the West is so bad at dating because people don't get that deep into their own philosophy and ideas early. They let that come into fruition later on. It's stupid. Lastly, he says organized cultural dating will also eliminate the nonsense about love is love. When you are a community, you are supposed to have an aspect of insularity, which means you have a standard too. And you know me, I always push when we talk about stuff on Shoot the Breeze. We have to create a standard. We can't be wishy-washy, flim-flammy, anything goes. We have to have a standard. But I know Kofi was chomping at the bit to say something. He agreed with Black Steel. Kofi, what are your thoughts?
No, that's the angle. What Black Steel landed on was what I was gonna start up on. It's what everything what he said is good. Most people just want to have sex, and children are a byproduct of that. And what I was gonna come at is basically teaching young men and young women what their value is, and what their value is, and what their consequences are. So for women, we have to practice chastity, and for men we have to also practice control and responsibility and accountability on both sides. And I think that's what's probably maybe lacking, you know what I'm saying, especially from an African standpoint. Look, we're all human beings. We all have, have lustful desires, things like that. I'm not saying that's not something, that they shouldn't, you know feel. Like they had this meme I saw on Facebook. It was crazy. It was this guy. It was, I don't know where it was in Africa. Woman, bad body, fat ass, everything, walking by. The man's on his phone, and the narrative is like, I'm about my money. I don't care about this or that. I'm about my money. And she's all walking and switching. I'm like, damn. And he's literally ignoring her, right? This man is laser focused on money. And I tell my son, I was like, women aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. You work on you. My son is his first year. He's my first year in college. I look, I do not want to be a grandfather. And he just started laughing. I'm like, I'm serious. I do not want to be a grandfather. And I told him what his worth is and his actions and what his actions may cause. And those actions are going to derail or stop what you want to do in life, right? I tell my son and my daughters that, right? And I think that's what these people are probably not getting. I hear some women, like my daughter, my wife. She was like, "Oh, my mother told me about sex." And he's like, "Well, you want to see what she told me about sex?" Like, what? She's going to hit me. That's what sex feels like, which is dishonest. But there's like no. You need some sort of. I wouldn't say fear, but you need to have some sort of knowledge or deterrent or knowing, like, look, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And when it comes to polygamy, right? So let's say, Black was saying, let's say, okay, you got caught, like he said, you got caught vaping in school and you got suspended and your test scores aren't so great. You know what? You're not for my daughter, right? What would happen is, and usually in polygamous societies, right? So when it comes to the first wife, let's say for the first wife is A1, she has, this is way back in the days, I had this conversation when I physically saw Dr. Umar and we were having conversations one time when he was here in New York. Your first wife is going to be A1. If her parents, this is African Senate, if the mother and father says it's okay, if you get the blessings from the mother look her over, what can you make? How are you going to take care of my son? Right? This is what my son likes. Are you able to provide that? You know what, son? She passed the test. Right? The dowry is good and everything is fine. And everything is fine. Fine, good. The second wife or third wife may not be, you know, prime like the first wife. So to Black Steel's point, then hey, you may get that guy. You know what? He's the second, third husband or whatever. He's not the best, but you know what? He's not bad. So we need like, and I do believe in that. And again, traditionally, that's a part of me I am conservative when it comes to that manner. If someone's going out with my daughter, I would like to know who this person is. Come on over. I mean, I remember. I mean, you guys saw Bad Boy. I think it was like 3 or whatever, and they had the boy come over and they had the gun and they scared the boy or whatever, things like that. But we again, and Black Steel says something that's very important too. The choices you make in life affects not just you, affects everybody. And that is the problem of the West. Where everyone is like is an individual when no one's an individual. You are part of a community. It takes a village to raise a child. You're all a part of the community, and that's our problem. We're too individualistic as far as like you mind your business, you able to do what you want to do, as long as you're not hurting anybody. That is a Western ideology. In Africa, everyone is very, very communal. Everyone is very, very communal. Everyone interacts with each other on a personal level because we know we are one. So basically, that's all I want to say. But very, very, very good outtake, Black Steel.
Yeah.
There's a
Cheryl says also tell them to stay away from the non-black women and men. Buana, go ahead.
yeah. Just quickly, there's an actor. His name is Christian Bale. I think that he acted in one of those Batman movies back in the day. He is currently developing a like a he bought like 12 houses for like adopted children or children without parents and things like that. Foster care centers or it's a whole thing in California. He's currently doing $22 million where there's like a community center where children could come and independent living spaces, pools and things like that, where children could. He's trying to foster something, I guess, create a community where he's fostering something to help raise children who may not have good parental guidance. I think that example is a good one. I think it's a good thing to do, but I think that this involves a whole lot of money if you're living in America. If you're living outside of America, it's maybe differently. But and maybe some of these single mothers could sign on, and go go to California and maybe get some housing. But as far as attaching yourself to black men who are trying to do something in life, man, I think that's going to be very difficult. But much blessings and success to the sisters who finding it difficult. Much blessings to them, and I hope that they do well in life, man. That's all I can say, man. Goku, I appreciate the time, brother.
If there's no other last thoughts on this topic, that will be the end of the show tonight. But before everyone leaves, I'd like you guys to give your shout outs. You know the deal. It's something positive you saw in the black world, something positive that happened in your own neck of the woods, something that happened to you, your kids, or whatever it is. Give a shout out if you will. Let me start with Kofi. Kofi, what would you like to shout out this week?
I would like to shout out Ghana. I heard they retrieved 3 tons of gold back. So I want to shout out to Ghana, and of course, even on Chorby, it seems like the momentum of African liberation from our colonial dictators and devils are. It looks like it's going to be a new day. 2025 on the continent look like it's going to be something historical. We're gonna witness, and I would like to shout out to them.
Good stuff, man, Kofi. I appreciate you being here. Make sure you guys tune in and subscribe to Kofi's channel for his broadcast when he goes live. Black Seal, what would you like to shout out this week?
Well, there recently there was a ceasefire approved between Israel and Hamas, so shout out to that. Um, it's funny. Donald Trump takes office on Monday. He's talking about extending the TikTok ban so that people can still have TikTok. He helped get a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. I mean, have we been too hard on you, Donald Trump? Maybe we treated you too harshly. But I'm joking though. But yeah, I'm glad they were able to do a ceasefire. Let's see if they keep it up though.
Appreciate that. Black Steel, Trigger Happy 262 plus in the chat says shout out to Neferkari Dessalines. I know some have contrary opinions to some of his opinions, but just got shouted out by Gerald Horn and confirmed some AES officials watch his channel. So that's good stuff. Shout out to Neferkari Dessalines. Last but not least, let's hear from Buana. Buana, what you want to shout out this week?
Yeah, I would just want to shout out to one of my good brothers. I'll tell you all the story. One of my high school brothers I went to school with, he's an older dude, and like a couple of years ago, like he was in his late 30s, and me and him was just liming, sitting down, drinking rum, and he always told me he wanted to go back to school to like become an entomologist, because right now he works with the government, killing insects and things of that nature when they have outbreaks and stuff like that. But his biggest ambition was to be an entomologist. So I encourage him to go back to school, see if you could get into college. So, you know, um, I persuaded him to actually even apply. And he applied, was accepted, and now this is his last year. He's going on his last year to finish his program, and I'm glad that he stuck with it because usually older brothers don't go to school. so so I'm glad that I was able to convince him to to um to stay this long, and the fact that this is his last year, I say shout out to him, and much respect to him. So that's what I would say a shout out to, But I'll leave it there. Yes.
Good stuff, man. Shout out to him for that. Good stuff. Good stuff. I shout you all out. Thank you guys for being here. You know who I want to give a shout out to is what's the brother name? Real Black Gentleman. I haven't seen him in a minute. Hope all is well with him. Shout out to Real Black Gentleman. Shout out to all of you guys who contribute to the show. Again, if you haven't joined the Discord, join the Discord. You can navigate to the Shoot the Breeze channel and post your topics. Make it a 2-sentence long post with an attachment to Twitter or YouTube or what have you. Something interesting, something that we could talk about and try to provide at least a thought towards some kind of African-centered solution to whatever the issue is. We should be back next week. I look forward to seeing you guys then. Until that time, you guys be good. Peace.
Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African nationalist and Garveyite network committed to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
I think black people acquire too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
To me, it don't matter. I think people are so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did. They lemmings. So to me, it don't matter, man.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedra Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They're a slave master, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as like your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you praying to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Africans generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www